Hey everyone, welcome back here to Techstrong TV. Our next guest is Mandich. Dennis is one of the Quantum Security 25 winners from our first list of the top 25 leaders in quantum security. First of all, Dennis, congratulations for making the list. Well deserved. And secondly, welcome to Techstrong TV.
For having me and putting me on the list. That was a lot of fun to get that.
I got to be honest, I was only one of, I think, about five judges. And no one of us made, a decision. It was done collectively. But what was interesting is, the way the process worked is first we went through our own list, then we shared that list with the other judges, and the overlap from judge to judge to judge. If I tell you, I think there were five or six names at the end that we maybe didn't make everyone's list, so to speak. And so it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be with that amount of judges, which I guess it shows, that, well, it shows one or two things. Either there wasn't really a lot of people to choose from, or, the people that we picked really have set themselves apart as leaders here. Dennis, why don't, and that's a great segue, why don't we, if you don't mind, tell people how a little bit of your journey, a little bit of how you came to be a leader here in quantum security.
Well, I'll start with kind of the middle, which is that the reason why your list is probably small is because it's a small industry. There's a small number of people who can get into quantum at all. And my background is I'm a physicist by background, but I spent 20 years in the intelligence community. And one of the things I saw in a couple of my last positions was the scale of IP theft by China from the US. And the tools were available in the intelligence community. They were even available in some of the biggest companies, but they just didn't use them. And they weren't really going to be very helpful in the quantum era. And so back in 2016, 2017, we helped stand up the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, which is the national industry organization that we have today with only a couple of dozen companies. Now it's, over 200 companies in the space, but that's still not huge compared to, computer uh, science, computer development, quantum computing, and so on. So we really helped stand up the industry. So we're pioneers in this space, especially on the security side of it, which is probably why I ended up on the list because there aren't that many people that do what we do. Most people are just worried that, hey, Q day's coming. Can we just update our algorithms, update TLS and so on? And that's just not going to do it. That's where really Qrypt comes in.
Absolutely. The other thing, though, that we have seen as a result of going through this exercise, Dennis, is that I can't tell you when Q Day is going to be here. I'm not even sure I'll be able to tell you Q Day's here when Q Day's here. It may be a little while after Q Day where I could look back and say, yep, Q Day is here already. But it's no longer the 5 to 10 years out that we've been talking about for the last, I don't know, 15 years or maybe more. It's sooner, it's much closer on the horizon where if we don't start taking, or maybe this is, I'll ask you, should we be taking prudent steps now?
Yeah, as you said, we won't know when Q Day is. If it happens in China, we're going to experience a deep seek type moment where they'll surprise us. The difference here is that China, since this is very broad implications for intelligence collection and operationalization of all the data that they're sitting on already, they won't tell anyone. They'll sit on that as long as possible to protect their sources and methods. That's much higher priority than any money that they could make out of it or any data that they could exploit for diplomatic or military purposes. Sources and methods are more important than intelligence collection. So it's
Absolutely.
very possible that Q Day, like you said, already happened, and they've outspent the entire US, all of our industries combined. We have entire facilities in China dedicated to winning the quantum race at all costs. They're going to graduate tens of thousands of physicists to do that. And we're behind in this race, and this is one we really can't afford to lose.
Sounds like a rosy picture. It was a tough news weekend, Dennis. Go easy on us.
Sorry,
Um,
I don't have good news in this space.
yeah. I mean, But that being said, so look, I'm a believer in global progress, and I think we're past the juncture where something pioneered in one country stays in that country, right? I think in sharing information is probably the greatest thing the internet has done. Whether you put up a firewall or what have you, information wants to be free at some level, and somehow it makes itself out there. Um, Talk to us a little bit. So your background, as you mentioned, physicist and intelligence, and talk to us kind of how you came up with the. You didn't wake up one day and say, "God darn it, I want to co-found a company,"
No.
right? No one does. And I've done a few of them myself, believe me. But tell us kind of the origination story, if you will, for Crypt.
The always in these interviews, I quote General Alexander, who's the head of the NSA, a little more than
Sure.
10 years ago. And he came out and said it, look, this is the greatest transfer of wealth from one country to another in the form of IP theft. And we don't know if we survive this as the world's global economic superpower. But you can only give up so much of your industry to another country before you become second. And I my position is I have 3 kids, I don't want them to have to work for Huawei one day, and so I felt that we had to bring something to market that would really solve this problem that, the intelligence community enjoys extraordinarily powerful cybersecurity tools, encryption technologies that are not public, obviously. We want to bring something like that to industry that would really solve this problem once and for all. I don't think people realize that the cryptography that we've been using and that we're about to upgrade is 1970s technology. It was made for telecom networks and infrastructure when a handful of copper wires and switches connected people, not the world we live in today. And that's really what we wanted to do. We wanted to bring something that, even if this next generation of algorithms completely fails, which is likely, we're told to be crypto agile, they'll likely be replaced in the future. That's no consolation for anyone whose data has been harvested and will be exploited at some point. So we need to solve the architectural piece of changing the way we do business in cryptography, and that's where really Qrypt comes in.
So you whet my whistle there. Where do we? So what exact? How exactly is Crypt doing this? How's it helping us?
So in the past, we always bundled the encryption keys and the data together in the same channel. So you've probably heard Harvest Now and Decrypt Later in the
Yep.
context of Q Day. Well, that's been going on for generations, not has nothing to do with quantum computers. And the fact that you can do that at all to capture that data in an encrypted state and exploit it when a flaw is found in the way the libraries were implemented, the way we generated keys, the random numbers used for those systems. And then it's all packaged together to be able to decrypt in the future at any point when someone at Black Hat reveals a vulnerability that they discovered. That's not a good situation to be in when we have many other tools available to eliminate that mechanism entirely. So if you think about public key infrastructure, the way we send every HTTPS session, every email, every text message that we do, that is based on that older technology. And all we do fundamentally is distribute encryption keys in that channel. What Crypt does is eliminate the key distribution mechanism and we replace it with simultaneously generating keys at the endpoints. So the keys are never in the channel and they're not correlated with the data. So even if somehow you're able to break any of those channels, it doesn't help you with decryption. So we eliminate the harvest now, decrypt later problem, even if these next generation of algorithms fail. That's high level how we do it.
Excellent. Excellent. Um, Dennis, you mentioned before, who knows when Q Day comes, did it come? Your advice for people out here who are grappling, wondering, I mean, obviously use Crypt, right? But beyond that, what's your best advice for folks?
I think it's collectively, we're all in this together, and especially in your company, this isn't the CISO's problem or the CIO's problem. It's the entire company's problem. It could be an existential threat for many of these companies. So treat it as a transition that we absolutely have to do. That's table stakes. But start looking at cybersecurity in general. Where are the crown jewels of my company and how to protect that as a board level decision. It's the C-suite and the company that's responsible, and the board should force that on their own companies. But broader, the US government has already said, look, if by 2030, in some cases 2035, if you have not at least transitioned to post-quantum cryptography, you can't do business with the US government. They're a Fortune Zero company. So it's incumbent on people using these tools and the people building them to get on board with this. If I'm buying, Microsoft Office or Zoom, I'm going to demand that they tell me what their roadmap is for post-quantum cryptography and what other security protocols will you implement to make me and my communications more secure, because I shouldn't trust anybody else anymore.
Agreed. Dennis, one of the things I've heard from companies and talking about this is, well, we already have quantum proof algorithms for our certificates, our RSA kind of encryption. It'll be okay as long as we upgrade to these post quantum algorithms and so forth. This is like Y2K. We're going to get all spun up about nothing. What do you say to those people?
Well, I mean, even NIST has told us, look, we don't know if these algorithms are secure at all. Saying that they're quantum secure or quantum safe, we don't know that that's true.
Because we haven't had a quantum computer to run them on. Yeah.
We might not even need one, because of the two finalists that were in the NIST competition for standardization, the other stronger one was broken by a laptop computer by a discovery from math that was in a paper in the 1970s and 80s.
Oh, geez.
So unfortunately, the PQC algorithms that were transitioned, there's no proof that they're secure at all. We're just hoping that, and since no one's broken them yet, that they will endure for some period of time before AI figures out how to do it, or even a bigger quantum computer comes online. That's a much deeper issue, which goes back to the heart of ServiceNow and Decrypt Later, which is we do not know if any public key infrastructure system can be made secure. So that's where Qrypt comes in, is really eliminate that entire model and change the architecture of the system so we don't have to rely just on a little bit of math and a handful of cryptographers who put it together to get security at all.
Agreed. Well, with everything else going on in the world, there's one more thing we could throw on the on the pile. I'm going to put you on the spot. Last question.
Okay.
When do you think this gets real, that we got to do this like now?
Yeah, fortunately, it's coming before 2030. If we're to believe the head of IPM and Google, they've already
Yeah.
warned this. It's not theoretical. This is coming faster than anyone ever thought. Like you said in the beginning, in the 90s, we thought we had 20 years. The timeline keeps shrinking every year as the increase in speed of developments grows. That timeline gets shorter and shorter. So it's going to take a few years to get this done. So at least we can focus on our high priority data and finish that before 2029. Sure, the cat videos and stuff, all that stuff can wait, but the really important stuff that's existential threats to our businesses has to be done now. And again, it's not, flipping a switch or upgrading a library. It's a lot more complicated than that. We've never done this before. The last
No.
transition was decades ago when the internet was tiny. The cloud didn't exist. We're in a much different world now that's extremely complex. It's extremely interlocked with other systems that we don't even know about. AI now. We need to get on this right now if we're going to finish by 2029 for our most important stuff. The other stuff's going to take 10 years.
You know what? I don't think we mentioned, for people wanting to get more information on Qrypt, where do they go?
Yeah, just Qrypt.com, Qrypt.com. Don't use autocorrect because it'll do CRYPT.
Yeah.
.com, unfortunately. So I miss a lot of emails because people don't realize that's happening in their email address. But we're available on the internet. We're at a lot of the big conferences. We'll be at RSA and so on. You can come meet with us there, and we're happy to help you.
We'll be there as well. Hey, Dennis, congratulations on making the Quantum Security 25 list. Kudos to you, and thanks for coming on here and talking with us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the reward. Nice meeting you too.
Nice meeting you. We'll be at Broadcast Alley all week at the RSA if you want to stop by. Denis Mandich, co-founder, CTO, Qrypt, here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be back.
Hi, and welcome. Welcome to our conversation about AI readiness in the mainframe environment. My name is Mitch Ashley, and I lead the software lifecycle engineering practice with the Futurum Group. Today, I'm joined by Anthony DiStauro. Anthony is Senior Director of Architecture for AI with BMC Software. Welcome, Anthony.
Mitch, thanks for having me.
You bet. Great to have you. Now, this is a three-part series. Our first part is talking about AI readiness, and the series is sponsored by BMC Software. We appreciate the folks at BMC putting this on and putting this together. So, Anthony, let's jump right in. So we hear a lot about organizations needing to be AI ready, especially for the mainframe environment. At the earliest stage, what does AI readiness really mean?
Yeah, Mitch, this question, I can't tell you how many times I get this, whether I'm speaking at a conference or a customer visit, this always comes up, how do we get going? How do we get started with that? And it's so foundational into a successful journey with AI, but yet it's a step that you'd be surprised how many organizations just kind of ignore or are not even aware there is a readiness, playbook that they should be following. So it all boils down to, from an organization perspective, how do we roll in AI technology? How do we use AI technology safely within our organization? How do we put guardrails around AI for protection against data, for example? From a legal perspective, what policies and governance that we need to have in place when we bring AI into our organization. And there's all kinds of challenges around that. But at the end of the day, that's one part of the organization's got to deal with that. And then it comes down to the individual, groups and departments within an organization on how they want to utilize AI. So the first really good step in that journey is looking at AI as an advisor, Mitch. Really look at it as like you would bring in a human into your organization, based on their experiences and their background, to have a dialogue exchange with them about whatever challenges that you may have. And you're going to lean on that person for their insights and guidance based on their experiences. AI, that's a great first step with AI, Mitch. Look at AI as an advisor. It's there to explain. It's there to guide. It's there to recommend, etc. It's there to provide knowledge and insights that you may otherwise miss or not know how to surface. So from that perspective, that is a safe AI journey to start moving your organization to. But then the other side of that is the skills of your staff itself. When you bring AI into an organization, you want to make sure that your staff is skilled in AI usage. You want to make sure your staff is skilled and understand on where they should be applying AI within the organization. So there's some education and training that need to be done for your staff. There's guidelines and policies that you need to be putting in place, guardrails that you need to be putting in place. And that's all very, very, very focused on individual organizations and what that means. But that's the first step to get those foundational aspects of AI in place.
That's a really good point about having that kind of direction you want to take with AI versus it's so accessible. We can use it, try it out, but how are we going to focus and leverage it for the organization? And you mentioned the concept of AI as an advisor, using that as your first entree into AI. Talk about how that is different than maybe automation, autonomous AI, agentic AI, all the terms that we hear about doing things with AI.
Yeah. So when you do hear about autonomous AI and agents, that's all around actionability and the AI perceiving a situation, making a decision, and taking it in action. Jumping into the deep end of the pool when it comes to AI in that regard, that's concerning to a lot of folks. So when we talk about the advisor part of that, the advisor takes no action, right? Again, the advisor is there just to guide you, nurture you, and move you along, but it's up to you, the human, to actually take those actions. It's up to the team who's using AI to infuse AI with the right pieces of information to get the right types of guidance that they want from that AI system. But that AI system is benign. right? That, again, the AI system is not going to take any actions on your behalf. It's all back to you and what you want to get out of that AI system. So if you're a developer, I'm going to use AI as an advisor to maybe give me code recommendations, code explain, maybe to do a best practices analysis on my code, etc. That's really good. And maybe from the AI ops space, Mitch, we're going to use AI as an advisor to oversee my dashboard and maybe surface insights to me out of that dashboard that I would otherwise miss. But there's no actionability to it in that regard. It's just providing the insights and information. So that is a part that fits very naturally into the advisor part of it, as opposed to the autonomy part of AI.
It's good you mentioned that because it is a much more comfortable way to kind of enter into the AI space and start to use it. You don't have to jump right into automation and agents and doing more of the advanced things, if you want to think of it that way. You'll build trust. You'll learn about AI by using it.
And we've done that ourselves, right? Look over the last 18 months, whoever your chat provider of choice may be, but that's how we all got into the game of AI when ChatGPT was released as an example. We all went out there and started having conversation with AI. At that point, whether it was professionally or personally, that experience was an advisor type experience. We sent it a bunch of questions and we got responses back and we had a conversation and a dialogue with it, but nothing happened. There was no actionability to it. So that was all of our entries into the AI world. And for organizations, for enterprises, that's a great first step also in the start of their AI journey.
To that point, there are plenty of ways to engage with AI and query it, use it as a tool. But what do you need to have in place to be an effective advisor role in the environment we're talking about?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've learned in our journey with AI so far, and I think as an industry, we've all learned, just bringing a large language model into the organization, not enough, right? That's the bare minimum entry that you could do. But the problem with just bringing a large language model into your organization is it doesn't have any context. Those large language models were trained on huge corpus of information. They were targeting the masses of users, where once you get into an organization and you bring AI into an organization, you're in a particular domain, you're in a particular realm. So now how do you utilize this large language model that's general purpose for a specific domain that you may be in? Well, the way you do that, and what we've learned over the past 12 to 18 months, is you have to augment that large language model. You have to augment it with real-time product data or whatever data, real-time data that your organization is playing in. You also have to augment the language model with additional knowledge, whether that's workflow knowledge, processes knowledge, best practices knowledge. It's your enterprise knowledge, whatever that means to you and your organization. You want to infuse that into your AI system. So then you have the large language model with your enterprise knowledge, with your real-time data access knowledge. It's a combination of all three of those that brings relevance to AI with an organization, because it brings relevant context into your organization in the AI perspective.
And when we're using AI advisors, and I agree with you very much about the point of contextualizing it with information about your organization, where do you see the fastest value that can be delivered by using AI advisor in the mainframe teams today?
It's definitely in the DevOps space by far. It's the DevOps community that has really opened their arms and embraced AI. And the mainframe environment is no different, whether, from the cloud environment to a distributed environment. In that realm, the developers have accepted AI in the mainframe space. You see a lot of interest, a lot of adoption AI in the mainframe space. So that is, to me, has progressed us as an industry, those working in the AI space. The work that the development community has done over the past year, 18 months, has really accelerated our journey with AI. Now, you're also starting to see other areas starting to get really interested in that. The AI ops space, as an example, is getting a lot of traction now when it comes to AI, and we're heavily looking into that within our portfolio in our AI ops part of it. But it's the knowledge capture that is what's going to play the biggest game here. Why? We're in this massive transition within the mainframe community. We have a lot of folks heading out towards retirement on the tail end of their careers. How do we capture that knowledge, and how do we infuse that into our AI system so that next generation coming in has that experience they can lean on that they otherwise would not have? That person they would go to, Bob is not here anymore. But if we were able to capture Bob's knowledge in some way, shape, or form and infuse that into the AI system so that next generation can lean on the AI system and get access to the information that Bob had, that is game changer in our mainframe space. It's not only helps get that next generation up to speed, Mitch, but I just had a conversation yesterday with someone about this. AI on the mainframe is making the mainframe sexy and attractive to that next generation coming out of colleges and universities. We're in the conversation, just like the cloud space and the distributed space, when it comes to AI and technology advancements in general. That is really cool.
There very much is a sense of excitement in the mainframe environment, particularly with AI. And you have a really good point about that knowledge loss. As folks retire, move on, whatever it might be. So the next generation of people working in mainframes have got that information contextually available to them in AI. I can't think of a better application of AI.
Yeah, absolutely. And we hear that from our customers. Our customers are like, we got decades worth of white papers. We got years and years worth of video recordings, training material, etc. How do we capture that? How do we get that into an AI system? And that's something with BMC Assistant that we took very, very serious, right? So it's like, well, how do we do this? How do we allow our customers to capture this knowledge that they have and get it infused into BMC AMI Assistant? And we're delivering to our customers a tool that makes that really easy to do, where they can manage documents, they can manage videos, and build out their own knowledge base that BMC AMI Assistant will be totally aware of. Now, when we ship our solution, we have the large language model, we have an AMI knowledge base that we ship. The customer can build their knowledge base, and then we have access to all of our product data. So we got all this information that's available to BMC AMI Assistant that goes back to what we talked about before, about what's relevant context to a customer.
We can't talk about AI without talking about trust. And I've heard you discuss the importance of explainability. Talk more about that. I'd love to hear your thoughts about why that's so important.
Oh, yeah. So with AI, of course, trust always comes up in the conversation. From the very beginning, when we all started working with generative AI, that was everybody was talking about trust in that regard. It's multiple ways to answer this. We have some responsibility in the solutions that we provide our customers. We got to give the customers insights into what our AI system is doing. We have to connect our AI system into their workflows and processes around auditing, logging, tracing, etc., observability in their organization. So how do we do that? So as an architect from the very beginning, foundational, we have to be able to capture everything that is happening through our AI system, through BMC AMI Assistant. From a user typing a prompt to us formulating a response, not only that it has to be auditable, but as much insight as we can provide on why we came about a response has to be clearly articulated. And some of that is clearly articulated back in the product experience. So when we give a response back, we may cite in that response why we came to this conclusion and what pieces of information led us to this conclusion. But it also has to be totally traceable and auditable behind the curtain. so that the administrators of the AI system have full optics into everything that is happening in that system. It cannot be treated as a closed door system. So it's the optics into the AI system. It's the auditability, traceability, logging, everything has to be done. So if you go into the system, Mitch, and you're working with BMC Amy Assistant day in and day out, the system administrator has full transparency into all the things that you've done with the AI system and when. And customers have asked us for that from the very beginning. We started working with our customers in this journey. That was foremost right at the top of the list. They need to understand what's happening in the system and why. And we've done that. That's foundational for us. That was something we had to put in at the lowest level of the architecture. That's not an afterthought. If you go with that approach as an afterthought, you'll miss things. It has to be done at the ground level of the system.
Yeah, that explainability and transparency is fundamental. That builds that experience that you start to build that trust with, very much so.
And it's that trust that's going to lead us to the next part of the AI journey beyond the advisor, where you look at AI as a true partner in your daily journey. You look at AI agents and agentic AI as a digital workforce doing work. But we got to take those steps and build that trust.
Speaking of taking those steps, for organizations that may be just starting out, thinking about AI readiness, what do you think are the smartest first steps to take?
We went through this journey ourselves. So we have a pretty wide and deep portfolio within our BMC Amy product area. So we had to go through this exercise. Where do we find true immediate value that we can deliver to our customers? The AI journey was new for us too. We had to be very careful, very systematic on how we approached it. So the way we approached it was, let's just start looking at the low risk but high value returns that we can give our customers with our AI infusion within our products, within our portfolio. And we've been very, very successful at that. But one of the key things, even though it's, it may be a low risk, high reward type AI enhancement, we want to be able to also capture and measure that. You have to be able to measure and capture that to make sure you're truly getting your return on your AI investment. This model worked very well. I spoke to other architects about this model. I spoke to customers about this model. And this is a really good entry point model. Start small. Don't try to drink the ocean, as they say. Start small, identify those low risk impacts. You don't want anything that's going to disrupt your business day to day, but then just start taking those steps. And before you know it, when your organization gets more and more comfortable with AI, you start building the trust with AI and you're starting to get a good feel of what you can and cannot do with AI. Before you know it, you're starting to take on bigger and bigger and bigger challenges with AI. And when you look in the mirror, you'll see yourself progressing pretty far, pretty quickly with AI when you start that way.
Those are some great insights, some very sage advice. I think, Anthony, thanks for joining us today. Thanks for being part of this. We really appreciate the BMC software team for sponsoring this kind of event where we can share this information, share some of our experiences, and bring up some of these important questions. So this concludes our first segment that we're doing in this three-part series covering AI readiness. In our second segment, we're going to be talking about infusing intelligence with AI, using AI as a partner, using generative AI in the mainframe environment. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on our next segment.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Ron Browning, who's the CEO of Dyna Software, and we're having a little chat about technical debt specifically when it comes to ServiceNow, which is probably maybe now one of the most widely used IT service management platforms out there. Ron, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike.
technical debt exists, I think, before and after we adopt ServiceNow. So, walk us through this a little bit. What kind of technical debt are people bringing with them into the environment in the first place that maybe they should just check that baggage at the door?
Well, when you think about technical debt, a lot of things are occurring in terms of legacy systems, legacy tools, business needs, and oftentimes just to accelerate or even meet business demand when you're, say, implementing ServiceNow, really either poor configurations or poor thought out designs get ported into ServiceNow, or items that, from a translation perspective, don't make a lot of sense to either rebuild in a custom way as opposed to leveraging out of the box features and other elements. Um, Oftentimes, what we certainly encounter in here is customers having that whole drive for speed and also trying to meet with what's the business trying to do, and basically getting pinched with, we got to just roll this out and pull it in. And from that point forward, that's where you start to get lots and lots of problems that start to snowball and sort of go forward from there. But that's probably the easiest overview to sort of explain the stuff coming in when you're just starting off.
How much of that is a technical problem versus a cultural problem? Because I think what happens is a lot of people just want to bring their existing workflows and port them on to ServiceNow, when in reality, somebody at ServiceNow probably already thought this through and just built a feature into the platform, right?
I think I would agree with you on the most part. There's an element of, well, to be honest, there's sort of that front end components of governance when you're thinking about standing stuff up. And one of the key principles to really start to instill in that type of a framework is the decision making around what moves in and why is really the key element of it. So I would certainly agree with you from a people perspective, process perspective, and why they're choosing to actually move stuff through is the ultimate culprit in terms of the initial onset of technical debt in that circumstance.
Now, once I start running ServiceNow, I also seem to wind up generating some technical debt. So, what's the source of that, and what can I do to kind of minimize that?
Well, very similar situations where you've got driving business demand. You've got short turnaround times that start to create creative approaches in terms of developing. What I've seen in my past specifically is situations where the fastest path was the key path to get something done. ServiceNow is a unique platform where, in oftentimes, there's maybe 10 different ways you could do something. And of those, in terms of safety, and I'll explain safety in a second here, there's maybe only 2 to 3 that are really the best path to actually execute to do that. One of those typically being just configure as opposed to script or build or develop. The safety sort of aspect is really thinking about what else is this related to. So a really good example, early days for me, I encountered a customer dealing with an implementation of HRSD, the human resources application suite from ServiceNow. And the issues with that not being able to move forward and not realizing the actual interconnections to ITSM and the knowledge management component, and really not having the ability to recognize and understand there's linkages here as you're actually driving forward. So when really building out and developing and meeting some of that business demand, understanding, are you configuring or building in the right sort of path, and also what's ServiceNow themselves doing that you need to pay attention to that might be related or could be related in the upcoming future.
Almost the same kind of question, but is part of the issue is I'm bringing a bias to that platform where maybe I think I need to build everything when I just need to configure it. And if I build it, then I got to support it and maintain it. And that's where the technical debt comes from.
100%. And the cascading challenges from there, Mike, are now you've got longer durations in upgrades. You've got more complication in analyzing and understanding what's there when you're either introducing brand new product or features from ServiceNow. Plus, when you're also building unique things for your business needs on ServiceNow, it's almost like a snowball effect. One of the best sort of analogies for what technical debt turns into that was ever shared with me was really about a loan where you've got compounding interest as you're going forward. And if you're not actually dealing with that and paying attention to it, it's eventually going to get extremely costly. And that's one of the big challenges a lot of customers are facing these days, is situations where even ServiceNow themselves are doing analysis. to understand how much tech debt is on a platform, and the recommendations starting to come back. You just need to re-platform, meaning just get rid of the whole thing and start fresh because it's become way too complicated and way too difficult to support and introduce some of those new features.
To that end, you cannot go anywhere near ServiceNow these days without somebody leaping out to tell you about some new AI agent that can do this, that, and the other. Will these AI agents help us reduce the technical debt, or might they actually increase the technical debt?
That is an awesome question, Mike. So I'll say my current perspective. It's a double-edged sword. Um, there's a lot of things where it can accelerate stuff like development. You probably heard the term vibe coding and other stuff these days. There's a lot of things that can accelerate certain pieces. The big worries I have is of what gets built and pushed out. Are the proper mechanisms in place to validate? One, is it actually good code? Two, is it secure? All those different elements. Missing component always for me is, what's this related to what ServiceNow is doing? Because what I've found in the past is not so much what I'm doing, but what ServiceNow is doing themselves. And when those come into conflict, I'm guaranteed to have some form of problem or challenge that's going to limit me in the future. On the plus, though, you do have a lot of different things that are coming out where it is accelerating either usage in terms of end user and elements there. Certain pieces where, if it's done in the right way, accelerating different aspects of development. But my future that I hope we really see is something where you've got very, very specific boundaries that some of these AI agents are working within, both in terms of context of the target instance or the target customer and what they've configured uniquely for themselves, and also making sure that you're sort of staying inside the rails of what is sort of safe to actually go and configure. I can't say that there's a whole ton of stuff out there in that vein yet, but I think that's the direction where stuff is starting to lead to, as people are getting more normalized with using it to basically develop and configure and seeing some of those sort of challenges I was mentioning just a second ago.
Are people kind of conscious of technical debt, or is it just something that kind of adds up over time and then they wake up and they go, holy moly, this stuff is going to collapse out of its own weight because I didn't pay attention to all this stuff? So maybe do we need, I don't know, flags in the system that somewhere that says, here's your technical debt rating?
I, it's a great question, and things that I've really seen is it's not so much that people are unaware as it's going forward. It is for sure a snowball effect. Oftentimes the root reason is, here's something that got developed, that got built, maybe something that gets scanned after the fact, meaning the code is already done and they're about to promote it. Then they find an issue and then they start to identify, do we need to pull this out, or do we push it in and put something basically to fix it after the fact? And oftentimes the business pressures are, we're just going to have to push this in effectively broken, get enough value out of it while we circle back and fix it. And that all starts to eventually build up. And the big challenge ends up being, usually platform owners recognize this is becoming unwieldy to try to move forward. And it's everything from the total duration in terms of upgrades, plus moving through new enhancements or installing new things, and the also ever growing cost of supporting it. And that creates a situation where people that own the platform are reluctant to add more things on. So business value and ROI sometimes gets deflated or stifled. Also then creating a situation where they're looking at this mountain. And to be honest, to go to business to say, I need $500,000 to remediate this stuff, very difficult conversation to have to get interest, because perspective on that side of the fence usually is, one, why does that even exist? This is your problem. But two, how does this even help my business? And making that connection that reducing the technical debt actually helps the business oftentimes is very, very difficult to actually achieve. Then you basically got stuck with a project that's hard to actually get off the ground, and then you just see nothing but accumulation, as you go forward. And I think that's part of the reason why ServiceNow starts to identify you're going to have to replatform and start fresh.
Now, does this issue get more challenging when, I mean, historically, ServiceNow has been an ITSM platform, but we're seeing it extended into all kinds of different use cases because, well, I can have a single platform and it's more cost effective. But a lot of the people who are running those other workflows outside the IT department don't even know what technical debt is. So, are we going to see more of it because we're going to have more, shall we say, non professionals building application environments that for different workflows, and they won't even think about technical debt till it's way too late.
I think you're bang on there. And just to link it back to your question about AI and where that's going, that's one of those big risks that I see. The ultimate goal from an enterprise use perspective would be get the ability to create closer to the actual end user or the business side. But everything you just said now becomes the major risk is what is actually being built. Is it considerate? I mean, at the root of it, with architectural principles and other elements, is it considerate of what's it going to be interconnected to and what could it affect upstream, downstream that then affects everybody else? So it definitely is a bigger risk as you go. What I was saying earlier about you having some aspects of visibility, understanding, and awareness, and creating some governance around that. That becomes the key thing to actually start to solve, those types of challenges. Nothing I'm going to say is 100% ever going to be bulletproof. Things change, things happen, but without something like that, it becomes very difficult to manage business expectations and speed while keeping a stable platform.
Of course, everywhere you go these days, people are talking about, well, AI, and is this going to eliminate the need for this IT person or that IT person? But much of what you just described seems like it still requires some sort of human in the middle of this thing. So our IT professionals listen to this conversation and basically having a good chuckle going, I don't see that happening.
I think it's true. And, I even in early days when at my company we were really investigating where all can we leverage AI? What does this mean from what our customers' potential is? The way I'd always look at it is that this is enhancing development, not replacing it. Even when you get into things like really complicated architecture integration, more of that systems level of how is this all going to fit together, and I'm meaning more peripheral to even just ServiceNow itself. It's going to be very hard to find something that's going to understand all the bits and pieces. So you're always going to need that level of oversight. The other thing that I always worry about too is that to get that skill set and capability in terms of our workforce, what does that mean in terms of the future and the gap that might be created if a lot of those junior roles that were gaining the experience to get to that level I just described start to disappear or get replaced by AI? It's an interesting conundrum sort of down that path. But to your point, I don't think this eliminates the need for, really smart and really capable developers.
What's your best advice then to IT leaders about how to have this conversation with the business side? Because to your early point, it's a little difficult and from their perspective, maybe even a little esoteric. So, how do I kind of get folks outside of the traditional IT leadership to wrap their heads around this?
Um, I, the way that I've seen it best done, to be honest, is making those connections to cost and business impact. And there could be situations where the recognition in terms of how quickly or how slow it takes before they're actually affected might come into play. But really making those connections that if we're not setting things up in a certain way and structuring things to basically protect what you're using, we're going to end up ever increasing cost, and it's going to translate to your needs being slowed down, consistently over time, more and more and more.
And how fast do you think businesses are moving these days or want to move on these ServiceNow platforms? Because Um, just because we can do something doesn't mean we should or do, but um, it almost seems like I think the proverb is something is to the effect that, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go with the many. And is this an opportunity to do the right thing with the many?
It's a good question. And I think over the last, say, 6 years or so, I've seen a bit of peak and valley in terms of enterprise use. And if I go back maybe about 4 years ago, I saw very substantial increase in terms of organization shared service use. So I'm thinking things like obviously IT, facilities, HR, like something where your actual stakeholders in terms of employees would be affected, and you could create more of a common experience that would be there. I saw some sort of slowdown in terms of that and a little bit more shaping towards IT and more IT function, security, those types of areas. But in the last few years, two or so, I've seen a lot more increase where the idea of enterprise usage and more importantly, overall service delivery and actually getting further than just employee and into customer space or citizen space, depending on what sector you're sitting in, that's starting to increase. And we're seeing a lot more large scale enterprise organizations really looking at ServiceNow as a foundational component to enable better service delivery and things that are actually affecting customers and actually affecting the way they generate revenue.
Well, let me ask you this, because you mentioned security, and we are starting to see IT teams take more responsibility for at least security operations, the management of the firewalls, whatever it may be. Um, but I can't help but wonder if the way IT teams are organized should change in the age of AI, because we built a lot of those roles and responsibilities around the various silos that existed. And maybe we're taking the silos down, so maybe we should reorganize the teams. What do you think?
Well, thinking back to some of my operation days, the reorganization probably creates some different turmoils. But I think to your point, the reshaping though, because there is a lot of shared responsibility that really starts to come around when you're thinking about who's using AI and for what, and what it's actually going to be affecting. There's definitely security components that need to come into play, but I think there's also going to be a little bit more visibility and a push on ownership in terms of those users, and let's just call it business areas that are trying to adopt to make sure that this is actually meeting and security requirements and being able to be more of a responsible and safe usage. I am seeing a lot more organizations standing up responsible AI tied with security, where a lot of the questions are diving into not just, what's the technical aspects of the AI, but what's the business use and the why, what's it related to data, all these different types of elements. So I think we will see something that becomes a shared responsibility. I'm reluctant to say I think it'll really reshape organizations, and that's only just my own personal opinion on seeing how difficult that sometimes is. But it's a great question.
So, what is that one thing you do see IT teams doing in the ServiceNow environments that just makes you shake your head a little bit and go, folks, maybe we want to be a little bit smarter than that?
Oof, that's a great question. The way I'd probably answer that is paying more attention to some of the basics. And oftentimes what I'll see is some ServiceNow customers getting themselves into challenges by sort of ignoring some of the basics in terms of code reviews, in terms of creating some of those structures of control that help make sure the right things happen. And there's two things on that note. There's for sure process and sort of individual involvement in terms of being able to have those right checkpoints. There's also leveraging tool sets that can help to automate those to make it more simple. And my belief is that a lot of times those get ignored just because of how difficult it is to capture everything and make sure you're seeing things. The worst stuff that I've typically seen is environment drift, where it's just the easiest thing to control. ServiceNow has built-in mechanisms, but how they shape delivery, they start to just ignore and drift that, changes in controlled environments, those types of things. So my gut would be right at just ignoring some of the basics, as crazy as it sounds and surprising.
All right, folks. Well, you heard it here. Hey, even in the age of AI, there's no substitute for mastering the fundamentals, because if you don't, you're going to pay for it later anyway. Ron, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike.
All right. And back to you guys in the studio.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel from Techstrong again. Welcome to our next session in our recent Futurum Techstrong sessions with our friends at Microsoft. Today's session is Patterns of Success, and it features Michelle Lancaster, General Manager and Partner for Global Leader for Business Strategy and AI Business Solutions at Microsoft, and Futurum's own Mitch Ashley, Software Development Life Cycles. Michelle is going to unpack the patterns of success emerging from the most transformative customer engagements Microsoft has seen. In this particular session, you're going to see how organizations are successfully operationalizing AI through apps, agents, and chat to drive measurable outcomes. It's not science fiction. It's not vaporware. These are real live engagements that are with real outcomes and real metrics to look at. You can expect a strategic overview of what is really working, why it matters, what's not working, and why that matters. And you can use these insights to drive and scale business impact with intelligent apps. Let's go to Michelle and Mitchell now. I hope you enjoy this session.
Thanks, Alan. My name is Mitch Ashley, and I am VP and Practice Lead of the Software Lifecycle Engineering practice at the Futurum Group.
And I'm Michelle Lancaster. I lead business strategy in our go-to-market team for Microsoft's AI Business Solutions team.
Michelle, I'm really excited to talk to you about this. The market is really energized around agentic business applications, AI agents, all of this. What's your experience about how customers are approaching and reaching out to go after this to start to energize their businesses with these technologies?
We've seen in the past 6 months or so, a lot of the hype cycles start to turn into the try cycle. And that is not a three-legged instrument here. It's really, how do we go from thinking about AI and applications as something that people want to dabble in into something that is the future of their business? We're starting to see apps and agents and Copilot come together, starting to see the power of taking automated applications powered with agents and humans and running Copilot over top of it as their overall UX system. We're starting to see people go from individual productivity to things like, how can I change the way my business operates? And we're starting to see some really impressive results in terms of not just time savings, but real dollars saved as well across many industries.
Yeah, I'd love to hear some about the organizational patterns that are coming about that are helping enterprises successfully coordinate multi-agent orchestration across business functions to help them deliver an impact.
It's a big question. Well, maybe we'll try to take it bit by bit. Multi-agent orchestration is at the forefront of where real transformation starts to happen. Having individual agents improve efficiency is one thing. Multi-agent orchestration can actually drive that business transformation. That orchestration layer brings us back into the heart of what I think the Microsoft value proposition is, which is not just the agents and the automation intelligence, but back to the core of security and governance. So you need to make sure that we have governance in place, we have rules in place, we have the group identities in place, and we've cleanly defined those. And it turns out that's also the secret sauce of the organization starting to move forward, finding the right use case and then starting with a foundation of security and a clear understanding of what the KPI is for that use case. Sounds relatively simple, but it is really the ticket to success of people going from launching individual agents, seeing full-scale business process transformation.
You know, Michelle, it seems like we're kind of moving beyond the technology as the barrier to really how we approach implementing AI, whether it's as a productivity aid or marketing agents to do work for us or even autonomous type agents. Can you talk a little bit about that progression and how companies are approaching it?
Yes. We really see this as a concept that we've called the frontier firm. We see that evolution through 3 different stages. It really starts with humans using agents as assistant. Think of Copilot, where you can summarize a team note or be reminded of the most important email in your box, really a individual worker aid around productivity. And we see lots of people experimenting in this space. We move into that second phase, which is humans working directly with agents. So more of an autonomous agent that is able to run a process, but is human-led. The human is directing it to do work, seeing the recipients of that work, and then continuing to move forward. People have started using researcher or analysts to summarize things ahead of a meeting. So that agent's really taking on that research work for you and delivering the final product with that prompt. What's really exciting is the number of companies we see shifting into the third stage of this, which is autonomous agents working with other agents and working with humans. Some of the places we start to see that advancement happening is in industries like manufacturing, where there are fairly complex processes where you are able to have multiple different types of agents working together to solve a problem. One of our customers has taken a look at supply chain management. They have an agent that's keeping track of the inventory inside all of their workplaces and in the places where they need to ship products. They have a reasoning agent going over top of that and saying, based on these numbers, based on what we're seeing in the predictive workflows, where do we need to increase or decrease the amount of changes? How do we then communicate that to the agent who does order fulfillment? That used to be a human being looking across multiple different kinds of spreadsheets, multiple different systems. The agents are there to work together to bring some of the complexity out, improve the efficiency, and then give that back with a human who's overseeing that work. And some of those gains there are really impressive. We've started to see things like 30% increases in order fulfillment and at a 40% decrease in the overall sort of stock housing costs of extra inventory sitting on the shelves for too long. And that's our aspiration, is to make sure all companies are starting to work across that flow. You'll see productivity gains. We will see ongoing transformation. That true sort of transformation takes place when you have all three of those opportunities realized inside the firm.
Yeah, let's turn our focus to kind of the guidance that we can offer folks about how to successfully implement AI and agentic applications. First, could you share maybe an example of a customer who measured a meaningful business outcome from their AI implementation?
I might give you two because the first one that always comes to mind for us is Microsoft. Our own best customers. We get tons and tons of calls from customers, from everything about Xbox logins to changing their Windows application to understanding why their Surface laptop is not working. We're able to quickly sift through all of those issues, but the game changer has been the existing platform, been built on a Power App. How are we able to sort of assistance for those call center folks? We now have a set of agents that are able to classify exactly what type of issue it is, match it to the right human being. They're provided the latest information on any of the common outages, challenges that we're facing in that space. They're able to get on the phone fully confident that they know exactly what is going on. It has really helped the efficiency of folks in those call centers. That assistive technology was able to take an average person going from about 100 calls a day to 300 calls a day. That's a pretty big increase in what a human being is able to do. And that's because they're able to more easily dispatch and resolve those calls with a happy customer. And that's the second thing, which I get super excited about. Efficiency is what we should largely expect from agents and AI. You don't always think of human satisfaction in the space, but we should. Our callers, they weren't waiting on the phone as long. They got more pertinent information. They were talking to somebody that was able to cut directly to the chase. That is a really exciting sort of value. Flip to the other side, we have seen in that industrial IoT space, large-scale manufacturers operating heavy industry equipment. They have had sensors on them forever. But those sensors have typically fed into an application. There's lots of data. There's very little insight. Introduce agents that can quickly make sense and build out insights. And that customer is able to take that existing infrastructure, the work that they had already built on Power Platform to automate processes, and have agents go through to start to make the predictive maintenance decisions. What they've seen is about $50 million cost savings just in the first factory they implemented alone. And they're also able to see quite a bit of improvement in terms of efficiency in servicing those. No longer do you have a single person checking the spreadsheet or checking all of the sensors, and you're able to precision pinpoint. That's sort of the next frontier of that, is when we're able to start to take human intelligence on those systems, combine it with an agent that's able to reason over data and to make a recommendation that is then able to be followed.
We're talking about AI, but we're also talking about the human element. What are the cultural or team structural changes that are effective or essential for scaling AI?
This is probably the most critical question, and that's an easy thing to say. What we've seen is largely learned through what Microsoft has gone through. We know that for the culture to be in place, you have to start with security and governance, really starting with understanding. You've got to make sure that people have a bit of psychological safety with the information being disclosed. You also build psychological safety with the fact that there is a future for humans in all of these work streams. When we talk about the frontier firm, there's not an instance where there is not a human being involved in those processes. It becomes question of how can you build trust in the data that's being provided so you feel like it's assistive and additive. There are also organizational protocols that are really important. That also goes back to security and governance, but it also goes to some level of explainability. We talk a lot about evaluations. We talk a lot about benchmarks. That's not just to make the products better. It's also to really make sure that if you're trusting an agent to run a part of your business, you want to see some type of performance report, the same way that you want to see that from an individual employee. Are they doing their job? Are they learning over time? That's why we've put a lot of focus into things like agent observability, the ability to run that through the governance center, and Power Automate. We've had this as part of the core of that product for a long time, something that we've built in throughout. So it really starts with trust from the individual, trust in the process, and then trust in making sure that you have some level of observability into that process to continue to make it better.
Michelle, let's talk about Power Platform and the role that it plays in simplifying multi-agent orchestration across different modalities like chat, apps, backend systems, and also how we interact with that, because agents are a little different than how they have to be managed.
It's a great question. It's one that I am really glad you asked, because we are getting lots of questions about what is the future of Power Platform and apps and what is the future of agents. And the answer is they are better together. Agents interacting with different applications inside the business through the work that we've already done inside Power Platform tends to be the ticket to success. In fact, some of our biggest customers, we have seen Power Platform power users have become the fastest adopters of Copilot Studio and Agents because that DNA is already there. We have built the Maker platform, the ability for observability, as well as the data feeds. And so that's really the fast pass towards AI. The organizations that have already taken the time to organize data, secure the data, figure out the right identities, and have the right systems in place to manage across are going to be the first. And certainly some of our biggest users have done this, from oil and gas all the way to financial services, have used Power App and Power Platform as the jumping off point for their agents. And they started with those agents attached directly to those apps as really sort of the people that are at the forefront of that frontier firm curve.
It's really intriguing, the agent feed. Tell us more about that and how that works.
Agent feed is one of our secret weapons as AI adoption rolls out across the organization. What agent feed does is that it provides that level of observability into both the application and the agent interactions. So you're able to see agents, you're able to see the interaction of how that agent is interacting with all of your data sources, as well as the interaction with the application. And that's super important because it is the way that we can continue to have the human element. We're making sure those agents are making the right decisions, that they're picking from the right data sources, and we're able to continue to make sure they are getting better at their jobs. That is something we feed back into all of the work inside our engineering teams, part of both a continuous process loop. It's also something that the makers and the creators and the owners inside the business can take to make sure that we're working on the highest order problems, that they're finding the right solutions and moving really quickly.
How does agentic automation reshape the way applications are designed, deployed, even delivered, built, especially by end users?
Already, we've seen a great adoption of Power Platform, but it's still been a relatively IT-driven activity. We have lots of different types of makers, but when it comes to an application that is widely used through an organization, that is still largely more in the technical space. The intersection of these two trends, though, really start to open up the door for everyone. My background is 100% in sales and marketing. I've built 3 agents that are now working with one of the Power applications we have on our dashboard. It has really changed the ability for folks to think about a problem, identify sort of what the parameters of that problem would need to be, identify some data sources, and move pretty quickly to get that done. So in my case, we are going from multiple meetings where we have multiple different asks. How do we synthesize those, and how do an app is running and tracking our feedback? I no longer have to send a bunch of emails out to the field telling them that's what's happening. The agents are collecting it. They're updating the information the app is tracking. We've just given access to that. I am just one example. We see many of the organizations with which we're working right now of where you have someone who is able to identify a problem that's common to the rest of the organization, find a solution, and get it out pretty quick. And the beautiful thing about that interrelationship between Power Platform and that agent maker space is that it's not just someone off doing something that then gets stuck. But when you're using that defined identity group, you can go from a single maker to widespread adoption. And that's the curve that we see. Can everybody create? And can everybody create a solution that is common to many and being used in a sort of exponential effect?
You talked about end user builders creating applications. We've been doing that, right, with technology platforms that we've had up to this point. But you said something really interesting about going beyond what we're capable of doing today, building agents. Never imagining that was something to do. Talk about what that looks like, what that future, what's possible for the end users in a world where they don't have to go to IT for everything.
Yes, and I would be in big trouble if I cut my IT friends out. But I think there is a place where, in the right sort of culture dimensions, you've already defined the identity groups, you defined the problem, and you've been able to put the parameters around security. So really being very clear about which information sources to pull from. That part is also something that used to be a pretty complex task requiring a lot of negotiation. When we do that now in this environment, we're able to either rely on existing identity groups and security protocols that are native in Power Platform, or we're able to really quickly give that direction to an agent by saying, please only pull from these types of things. So for example, if you're using Researcher, you can say, please only pull from our internal work documents. As we think about widespread adoption, it is really shortening the curve to creation and then being able to demonstrate value. That is the key crux. IT professionals usually care about system access and the system identity pieces because that's what makes sure that nothing crashes. They also care about usage, making sure we start with security in mind and then we solve that most repeatable use case tends to be the thing that has enabled makers to create and then IT to love the stuff.
When we talk about builders, you might imagine starting completely from scratch, but we're really not. We have a lot of things in place that IT has put in place and also that are built into kind of the fabric of the tools, the capabilities. Talk about that a little bit, Michelle.
Yeah. And when I talk about identity management, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about Entra and the many things that we have built in to that. So when we think about defined identity, it's why starting with Power Platform is that shortcut. In many cases, we've defined through Entra what the IDs are. We have also defined group identities. We define rules for what those different groups can access, what they cannot access, and at what times. And so it becomes very easy and it gives an extra level of trust. I'm really excited about the continuing investments that Microsoft is making here. That core strength of what we've had in Power Platform is joined by things like Purview, Agent 365, that is that control plane for agents.
This is a great time to be in technology, but be in business where we're able to leverage AI. Thanks for sharing your insights, some of the learnings that you've had working with customers, even your own as you're building agents. So we appreciate you sharing that with us.
Thanks so much, Mitch. Appreciate it.
One of the things that's most interesting to me about AI is not only what we can do with it, but how it's changed about how we think we can solve problems and who can solve those problems. We've had citizen developers and tools for creating applications in business units and outside of IT and situations where they still need to come to IT to kind of get the harder parts done. And it seems like we're passing that. We're moving past some of those barriers into a world where some of the constraints around what we can do with technology are being lifted or lessened of a burden on the end users. And that's when things change. That's when systems fundamentally change because you remove constraints and now what's possible is actually even increased the space of what you can do. It's really interesting to see how Microsoft has approached this of having an embedded base of customers that are using the current generation, if you will, of technologies, but helping them move into this agentic future. And it's not a jump off the deep end. It's a process to move through that, but also helping customers understand what you can do and who can do that and how to leverage those tools, while at the same time, security guardrails, governance, the things that you need from a corporate or an enterprise standpoint, not are checkpoints at the end, but also built in to the processes and tools that you have so you can start to leverage that as well. It's really exciting to think about the future of agents and what they can do as we moved into the second and third phases that Michelle talked about around agents doing work for us and then working along agents. I kind of think of it as not just humans in the loop, but humans leading the loop of agents that are doing that work for us. So it's an exciting future. And I think we'll have a lot of opportunities to share our experiences along the way on this journey.
Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Techstrong Gang. I'm Mike Bizard, and we're joined today by Tracy Reagan, John Schwartz, and Jack Poller, our usual assortment of gang members, and we're going to have a little chat about a bunch of topics, but I will just start off Friday with the note that says, my Fridays are all the same. I wake up in the morning like everybody else, and I go, wow, thank God it's Friday, which is quickly followed by, holy crap, it's Friday, because I'm usually behind on something. But let's jump in on things that maybe we're all a little bit behind on, and it has to do with the number of vulnerabilities we're starting to see in our code bases. We have a report this week from the folks at Black Duck talking about how I think there's like 150% increase in the number of vulnerabilities that they're seeing in code bases. A lot of it gets traced back to open source software, not surprisingly. I'm just not entirely sure of a couple of things, Tracy. Are we just getting better at discovering vulnerabilities, or are there actually more of these vulnerabilities and we're having an issue because, people are writing and contributing code using AI tools that maybe are creating more problems than we like to care to admit?
I think it's a mix of all of that, right? I mean, this is a discussion we've had in the past, at least I have been pointing it out, that the more we use AI to generate code, the more likely it's going to pull in open source packages. It's just the way it works, right? That's just how software is developed. I think it's interesting that we were talking about 80% of companies using open source, and now we're talking about 98% of companies using open source. So that is something to wake up and say, holy crap. We have a lot of companies using open source now, and how do we protect it? And I really think that the industry is making a gallant attempt to try to adjust to the number of vulnerabilities coming through the open source supply chain. But at the same time, we are faced with other kinds of vulnerabilities that we are not doing a good job of tracking, prompt injections, jailbreaks, and the ability to even manage our AI components, LLMs, versioning LLMs, understanding prompts, where if they've changed. So the industry overall is trying to make some adjustments to address this. We do have, I think that last year, I could be wrong, I haven't checked in a while, we had about 23,000 vulnerabilities. We're looking at somewhere around 47 high-risk or critical vulnerabilities every single day that comes through the software supply chain, but that doesn't mean you're consuming it. So when you think about if you're consuming even 10%, you're looking at 5 high-risk or critical vulnerabilities that hit every single day. And we can't catch about 80% of these vulnerabilities in pre-deployment. But the truth of the matter is 100% of the attacks are in production. So we have some gaps. We have some new technology hitting us, like AI-fueled code bases, AI adoption in the code bases, and new kinds of components to manage. So yes, we have quite a bit of work to do, and there are areas that we haven't even begun. So we've got some great opportunity. Let's just put it that way.
So are the maintainers of the open source projects just overwhelmed, and do we need to do something to help them, maybe get them some AI tools, or what has to happen here to get the fix in?
AI tools, absolutely. I've been standing on this soapbox for a while. We focus so much on shifting left. Shift left, shift left, shift left. We do everything we can in the software supply chain to eliminate vulnerabilities as much as we possibly can, and we have to continue to do that. But there has to be a better defense mechanism in post-production environments. Most of the tooling right now is heavy, hard to adopt, requires a lot of teams to agree to how they're going to do it. In particular, if you're going to add to the stack and you're in constrained environments. Should we continue to focus on making post-deployment vulnerabilities the most important, or do we start talking about how to defend against the ones that really matter? Now, in the case of the kinds of the problems that we're seeing now with AI applications, we have everything from trying to figure out who can access particular LLMs in an environment. Are they allowed to access the company address and phone number? When software developers are actually working, it's like we used to have restrictions on database tables. Now we have to think about having restrictions on LLMs. Even that is a problem for us. And when we talk about vulnerabilities, we often just talk about open source vulnerabilities, but there are other kinds of vulnerabilities that are starting to enter this supply chain in the way we're writing AI applications. So this is a broad discussion. Now, I know ChainGuard recently announced that they're starting to apply SLSA to open source packages. It's huge. That's going to be a huge help for companies if they want to go somewhere where somebody's applying SLSA 2 to those environments. But it doesn't get us far enough. We still have a very long road ahead of us to really sort this out. And, I'm just focused on fixing fast what really matters, because the noise out there is so intense that sometimes we software developers start tuning them out. When you get this many vulnerabilities reported to you from your repo, sometimes you just go, I can't do it all, and you focus on stuff you can do.
Jack, it takes two to tango. So I think if I look back in time, despite all the vulnerabilities, we've been kind of lucky in that I think most of the bad guys, maybe they've been exploiting 3% of the known vulnerabilities, but now they too will have AI tools that make it easier to discover where those vulnerabilities are and then create the exploit behind it. So, are we creating something of a primordial mess here that's just waiting on a catalyst for something really bad to happen?
I don't think we're creating a primordial mess. I think it's one that's always existed and that we've just accelerated it with AI, which makes it move both faster and gives a sense of scale to it. One of the issues we have really is an issue of implicit trust. And the early on in the life of the open source community many, many years ago, the theory was you had access to all of the source code and therefore you could validate it and you could have trust that it was secure because nobody would ever embed a security hole or explicit or be malicious in source code that you could see. And that theoretically still exists, that you can see the source code, you can see if there's something bad happening or not, but the scale is too big for humans to be able to go and validate every single package that they're incorporating in the open source that they're incorporating into their app to say, do I trust it? Is it secure? And one of the things I think Tracy alluded to, that one of the articles that we have talked about, I think is very important to talk about, is AI agents are now recommending an open source package, which will then pull in a whole bunch of dependencies on top of it. And there's this whole implicit chain of trust. If the AI recommended it and starts pulling it into your source code base, do you actually understand it and do you trust it? And one of those dependencies somewhere along the line may have been co-opted or corrupted by a malicious actor. And if you don't do the due diligence to figure that out or employ a tool to do that, you've just trusted your entire security to something you've never inspected or looked at or understood what's going on. And so I think that's where the AI is coming into play here, is not so much that you're enabling the attackers explicitly to do something. It's just the scope and scale problem just gets magnified huge orders of magnitude more code that we're pulling in and doing things faster and faster without the ability to take that stop. And, I think Tracy mentioned shift left. At some point, shift left comes to stop what we're doing and validate everything that we're doing actually is using secure stuff and is secure before we go on.
So Tracy, to Jack's point, and we've kind of alluded to this before, but I wonder if we're reaching a crisis point, but a lot of this stuff is just developers downloading software components from repositories, whether it's GitHub or whatever. Do we need to revisit the way we think about those repositories to make sure that we're pointing developers at things that are relatively secure? I mean, it may not ever be perfect, but right now it kind of feels too random.
Well, there are already ways for us to see into those repositories, and if those open source packages or teams are making an attempt to be somewhat compliant with security, but we don't use them. The tools are out there, but it's onerous, right? There's a lot to do to make sure that we're pulling in secure packages, or to go and evaluate an open source's compliance level using tools like OpenSSF Scorecard. So we have tools that are out there. We're just not adopting them. We're not using them. There are some tools that we've gotten in a habit, scanning our code. We've gotten a habit of doing that. We try to go to, companies like a ChainGuard or a JFrog or a Sonatype to find repos that we feel safe about, that we can pull our code down into. But no matter how hard we work on doing this, and we find those, we collect those 80%, it's not those that are giving us, heartburn. It's the ones that we find afterwards. It's the ones that are found when your code is out there running that takes, most companies are taking at least 60. The government takes about 100 days to address them. So no matter how hard we work on the development side, no matter how many tools we implement, it's onerous. There's so many vulnerabilities coming across, and most of them are found. The day they're found, everybody's running in production has probably that vulnerability. So it's post-deployment that becomes the essential part to fix. And I feel like we as an industry have focused so much on shifting left that we're forgetting about how important it is to fix production. Now, something that Jack mentioned made me think. We can use AI to help us fix these vulnerabilities in the development lifecycle. There was a CVE that came out, and it's been probably a month ago that I read about it, so I apologize. I don't remember which one it was. But it used to be that we would say it takes a hacker 10 days to exploit a production CVE. This one was exploited in 6 hours using AI. So now our hackers are using AI to figure out how to exploit these. So we have an even more urgent call to start having a defensive process. Offensive, you score points when you keep vulnerabilities out of your supply chain early on. And it's great to score points. But once it's on you're in your defensive zone, you've got to defend what's running in production as quickly as possible. And it seems to me that's where we're losing ground. Because more and more get opened up in production or identified in production, and it takes us so long to get them fixed and some of them have breaking changes. So there's very good reason why it takes a long time to get them fixed, but we got to close that door. And I think AI will help us do that.
Jack,
Can I ask you go ahead.
I was just going to ask Jack, are we going to see more 0 days in the future, or what do you think will be the ultimate outcome here?
Yes, we'll see more 0 days. I think because, inside baseball term, but the attack surface is just growing exponentially, right? The more we have AI helping us code, the quicker we can create, not only develop our applications, but just do more. We can create more applications. There's, whether a vulnerability is introduced by AI or by AI or a human sucking in an open source package from the downstream, or by a human just coding it incorrectly, vulnerabilities occur, right? We have these bugs that happen, and the more packages we have, the more applications we have out there, the more it's going to be exploited. It's just a fact of life. It's just scale. And there is absolutely nothing in security where there's a single silver bullet where you can say, I'm going to do this and all my problems are solved, right? That's why we often talk about defense in depth. And defense in depth in this case is very, very important. You do have to focus on the shift left problem of trying to prevent the vulnerabilities from entering the production environment. But you also have to understand that no matter how hard you work to prevent that from happening, it will happen. So you also have to shift right and say, how do I be reactive and proactive in my production environment, and say something bad has happened? How do I identify it, mitigate it, and prevent it from happening again in the future as quickly as possible?
So I was going to ask an overarching question. So given all the chatter about 0 days, larger attack surfaces, I think you mentioned, Tracy, 23,000 instances. Is this just part and parcel, this overarching storyline of acceptable risks associated with AI? Because as it stands now, open source components are here to stay and to even prosper and grow even more so. And what I'm asking, are the benefits worth the risks given all that we've just talked about?
Yes.
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 100%.
They
Yeah.
are.
So I want to emphasize that, because when we often talk about software risks arise through open source and this level of dependency and this foundational layer of modern software, there's a good side. I mean, that's, I guess, what I'm trying to underscore is that will continue, but it's the benefits far outweigh the risk.
So let me postulate an alternative scenario, right? Because back when we first started making cars, everybody said the risk was worth it because we're making all this progress. And the same thing with airplanes. And it wasn't until we had some catastrophic events and people wound up sitting in uncomfortable positions in front of congressional inquiries that things actually got better. So
because I'm wondering, I mean, this is going to sound really corny, but is there like are we going to need like the equivalent of a Ralph Nader or someone who takes the mantle after some sort of catastrophic event? Because it almost seems inevitable. There's going to be some sort of, I hate to say digital Pearl Harbor, but there's going to be some sort of incident that precipitates more consumer friendly or security friendly type of advocacy.
Well,
We had that. Log4j was like a Pearl Harbor. That was a massive security awakening.
we've had a number of incidences, but more importantly is your tolerance for risk is different depending on who you are and what you're doing. Right. As a side note, taking the conversation a little bit differently, my wife was a professional, she's retired now. She was a professional statistician developing and helping companies approve medical devices. And she was always asked about, well, should we do this or not? And her position was, as a statistician, what I'm doing is helping you measure the level of risk. I can't tell you what your risk tolerance is, whether you find that acceptable or not. And a lot of, I think, what I'm talking about, maybe Tracy as well, I don't want to speak for you out of turn, but we can tell you that there is risk here in doing certain things, and there's more risk doing it this way, less risk doing it that way. If you are one type of organization, if you're a bank and you have $1 billion assets under management, and you want to be very careful about how much effort you put into protecting that and what your level of risk tolerance is. Maybe you don't find passwords acceptable because it's so easy to attack that and therefore steal that $1 billion of assets. On the other hand, if you're me and I have 17 cents in my bank account, I am not so worried if somebody steals it. Go ahead. There's not much left to steal. So, again, it's a little bit of that. Now, when you look at, if I take that attitude and expand it to, a sort of thinking about a policy and, national policy or something else, I think it's a worthwhile discussion to have, is sort of overall, what's our level of comfort with software risk? And again, somewhat, our desire to protect our state secrets, our military secrets, our government databases and financial data, our healthcare records are much more than our desire to protect your what you liked on Instagram or Twitter, right? And so it's, do we need a national one-size-fits-all policy? I think that's very debatable.
All right. Well, folks, I think we can talk about this forever, but I would just point out that, the world's more dangerous than it was even 2 months ago, and watch this space and see what happens, because there's a lot of critical infrastructure out there that's dependent upon open source software and other components that may not be nearly as secure as we hope or need, but cross your fingers and hopefully nothing bad will happen. Let's shift the gear here and continue to talk a little bit about software development. But John, reports are out that says that OpenAI is going to shift away from reliance on GitHub and build its own little internal repository for building its own software. And I can't help but wonder if this is the beginning of a larger trend.
It sure might be. One of the reasons I think, and let's give credit to the information which broke this story, and to kind of step back, they claim that this project within OpenAI is in its early stages and months away. But what happened, according to this report, is that this decision by OpenAI to develop an internal alternative to GitHub was precipitated by some frequent service disruptions of GitHub that hindered OpenAI's own engineering workflows. So that has put OpenAI in this kind of interesting and unusual position of building a rival to its primary benefactor, major investor in Microsoft. It's according again to the report, because this is, I think, important to point out, OpenAI's new repository intends to go beyond AI that suggests code to AI that does work. And I'm wondering, not just beyond OpenAI fissure with Microsoft, but other companies following suit, as you said, Mike. So it'll be interesting to see. We'll see what happens.
Tracy, I'm asking the question, and correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, but it seems like, early days with repositories, a developer would download some software and use it locally and then maybe incorporate it in a build, and away we go. And then over time, it seems like the repository became part of the development lifecycle where they were, regularly doing pull requests. And now we have AI agents who are going to be doing these pull requests all the time from repositories. And if you read a little bit into what OpenAI is saying, is they're basically saying that the GitHub model isn't going to be sufficient to enable them to build all these AI agents that are going to be constantly making pull requests. So is the whole way we think about building software about to change? And maybe that's at the root of this thing.
Oh, it has changed. I mean, if you think about where we've, all of the iterations of repositories that we've gone through, the one thing that Git was really popular because people loved its forking capabilities. All this branching that you could do. You could branch the branch, and you could branch. That was really important in monolithic software development. But it started to go away in microservices. You don't have to have that many forks and branches in a microservice. You have a smaller bit of code. So even at that basic level, GitHub is getting a bit long in the tooth, like many of our development tools. I say this about Jenkins all the time, and GitHub Actions and Jenkins plugins. This is ripe for disruption right now. It is ripe for disruption. It's going to take a while, though. There are still companies out there that are using other version control tools. Let's just say that. It's going to take a while for everybody to decide that they need to dump their Git repos and their Git organizations and move to another platform. But if OpenAI plays the game in the way it looks like they're going to build more of a development environment and an integrated development environment with tooling that's more specific to how we write AI applications. And GitHub is not necessarily that tool. And, I'm glad that they're bringing it up. I think that Microsoft has the money to do some work on GitHub itself. There certainly hasn't been a whole lot of new features, like really big announcements about how we develop software, or how we're going to, like I said in the last discussion, how do we version a prompt? That's not even being discussed. So let's hope OpenAI charges forward and brings this conversation forward so that potentially Microsoft might say, you know what, maybe we should put some money into GitHub, because everybody loves it. It's no doubt. Everybody loves GitHub. But there have been some pretty ugly things happen over the weekend. We had HackerBot Claw or Hacker Claw Bot. Mm-hmm. And it basically took advantage of GitHub Actions that were being approved through AI and updated code that said, hey, kernel, would you mind giving me these tokens? And then before they knew it, Trivi's repo was hijacked and deleted, including all their GitHub stars. So we got issues. We have some problems here. And we don't like to change. Developers are the worst kind of people for change. They do not like to change that fast. When they get ingrained, it's like religion. The kind of build they use, the kind of language they use, and the kind of repo that they use. So it will take a while, but it will be, I think that developers will begin jumping ship when they're really invested in building tools using AI, and they want an AI IDE, a full AI IDE.
So what do you expect to have happen here? Because John and I were talking about this earlier this week, and it's one thing for OpenAI to say that they're going to use their own repository internally, but do you think that they will expose this to other developers to go build applications and software and kind of create an actual full-blown competitor to GitHub, or will other organizations and everybody just go out and get their own little repositories? Tracy?
If they open source it, developers are going to use it.
Mhm.
If they open source it and to follow the same kind of model that GitHub has for open source teams and small companies, if they open source it, it will be used.
So I think yes,
I was going to quickly say, I wonder if part of what OpenAI is doing, and God knows this may have probably been leaked intentionally to the information. The idea is to leverage or force Microsoft's hand to address what's the problems, issues with GitHub. Perhaps.
I was going to go there in a slightly different way, that I think this is a very big trial balloon by OpenAI to decide if this is a product direction they want to go in. If people are receptive to this and say we need this, Tracy made the point, and I apologize, my network dropped for just a bit, so I didn't hear all of Tracy's stuff. But Tracy brought up a little bit of the history of source code repositories, and I remember I grew up in the days of CVS and Perforce, and the biggest argument there was whether or not you locked your repository and locked your files, and what happens if you locked your files and somebody else needed to make a change, and how do you unlock the file, right? And that was one of the big GitHub revolutions, is you didn't have to worry about that, or the Git revolution, right? But the one thing that OpenAI made clear was, well, two things. One is the reliability problem, and I think that was just a smokescreen for Git is made for an entirely human workflow and how a human interacts with it. And if you're thinking about and contemplating high-speed, high-scale autonomous development, do you want every single change logged into the source code repository so you can see what's happening and look back at it? And if so, how do you do that? And how do you make that work at scale with a workflow that is, what's the term we used to use? A co-programmer workflow, where the co-programmer is not pair programming, right? Used to be pair programming where you have 2 or 3 people working side by side. Now we're talking about is pair programming where it's you and an AI agent working side by side. And maybe you want that AI agent to do rapid code iterations and therefore rapid check-ins to the repository, and maybe Git as it stands today isn't built for that type of workflow and you need something else.
So, John, let's walk this a step further. We see Anthropic is over there with its Claude coding tools, rather popular among developers. Might they lock arms with their major investor, AWS, and go build an AI native repository that's going to actually compete with GitHub? It seems like maybe that's the way to go.
I think you may be on something, Mike. Yes, this is a very interesting situation we have going on here, and usually OpenAI and Anthropic are in the middle of this kind of like circular firing squads where they're working with companies on one hand and benefiting from their investments, and then they see eventually they're going to have to compete with these folks. This is like classic relationship with Microsoft, where you work with them until you become their enemy and they come after you. But yeah, I could see this evolving into alternatives. I mean, it's just natural. It's just progression. It's just the evolution of how things are moving in this industry, and people are experimenting until they decide they're going to go their own way and reap their own benefits.
Tracy?
I was going to say, we have to keep in mind too that it's not just versioning when we're talking about repos. It's not. GitHub Actions and GitLab and all of the work they've done, they became kind of the new CI/CD server with all their actions. Steve Taylor, my partner, we were looking at, some of these topics probably a month ago or 2 months ago. And he discovered that you could take 1,000 GitHub Actions and put them into less than a dozen MCP servers. Now, what's easier to manage, 1,000 actions or a dozen MCP servers?
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to how we think about repos, it's not just check in and check out. There's a lot that goes into your repo, including all the scanning and all the security tooling that we were talking about earlier. If those parts of it become, have always been an issue for DevOps engineers and platform engineers, because you have all these actions that are everywhere. AI is going to clean all that up. So it has to be a major change in how we see it. As Jack was pointing out, this isn't for human interaction. And we don't, this stuff doesn't need to be for human interaction any longer.
There you go. Now, Jack, here's my cause for optimism. You ready? What if we actually did security right from the get-go? If we shifted over to these AI native workflows for building software, is it possible? What do you say?
Only if we get rid of MCP. MCP and security are not compatible. I don't know what else you want me to say, right? Not yet. MCP and security, it's like, hey, let's do whatever you want, but keep it completely anonymous. I don't know how you make that secure. But yes,
prompts in general, context windows are not secure,
sure,
right?
Exactly. So there is, but yes, Mike, cross our fingers. We can hope that if somebody says, I want to do a clean slate design and take into account AI, maybe they will also do a clean slate design and take into account security and do the right things from a security perspective. I can only hope.
As the man said, hope is not a strategy, right? So you're telling me don't count my chickens on this one. All right, we'll see.
We got to figure out two-factor authentication between two agents.
Oh, well, that's called X509 certs, but we do have machine-to-machine identities. Thankfully, we solved that problem. I don't know, many, many years ago.
All right. I'm going to move us along to something I hope is actually hopeful, but you never know in this day and age. But we also have a report that John put together about the Tech Corps, which is kind of like the Peace Corps for technology. United States folks are out promoting the adoption of our technology for hopefully good use cases and not for evil. But Jack, what's your assessment of what's going on here in the world as we currently see it? And, to be honest, we're not the most popular people in certain quarters of the world these days. So what do you take on this whole effort, and what should folks maybe expect from it?
Well, I think it's for a start, it's a good way to maybe change the popularity. But one of the things you can look at is the Peace Corps was predicated really on the fact that we could export labor and knowledge to areas that needed both, and at the same time benefit our youth and give them an education and a sense of duty and a sense of service. And what we're doing now is putting together a program within the Peace Corps to do the same thing, but instead of exporting physical labor, we're exporting knowledge labor, specifically around the STEM environment, science, technology, education, math, bringing U.S. technology and the ability to deploy U.S. technology stacks, particularly AI technology stacks, to areas that could use it and benefit from it, where they don't have that natively or don't have the resources and ability to deploy it appropriately. I think that's a really good thing from developing the youth of our country to have more people involved in STEM training and to export that to the world. I'd like to see, science and education majors and people who are interested in that be willing to go to places that need help and do that, rather than, saying, I can go dig ditches in the middle of to some place that needs, mechanical labor, human labor. I don't think that's really a good way to improve our own youth as they're growing up. And then I think there is a strategic component here, which is the exporting of U.S. technology and helping people understand and leverage that technology and sort of embed that in. And, in one sense, it's the old, if everybody remembers DEC, Digital Equipment Corp, and then Apple did this as well, is giving away free computers to universities so that everybody learns on that computer and then wants to use that in their professional life going forward, right? That was a classic strategy from Digital Equipment, from DEC. It was a classic Steve Jobs move. Let me give computers free. Everybody who was in the university or in the high schools used that. I mean, Google's done that as well with the Chromebooks for grade school kids. And so I think that helps cement the U.S. in lots of different places.
Right. John, you wrote this story, and in the story you noted that the Chinese are out promoting their approach as well. So is this becoming a battle to win the hearts and minds?
I think you're exactly right. Yeah. So when this first started, I think the program started under JFK, and it was run by his brother-in-law, Sergeant Schreiber, 1961. And it was basically projects in agriculture, education, spread of goodwill. But in a sense, I almost feel as if there's a political aspect to this. I'm not going to hit that aspect too hard, but yeah, there is concern about China and about DeepSeek and Qwen 3. They have become preferred tools in the developing world. So this is a nod to that. And it does, for me, a little bit slightly. I want to be very positive about this, but I want to also point out that the traditional mission of Peace Corps was neutrality. And I think I'm going to say the mission was to promote world peace and friendship through community-based developments, etc. But I also think there's a political element to this. And it always is with tech and this administration. And I think it has as much to do with planting seeds, so to speak, in a kind of a counter move to what China's doing. So I do think it's motivated that way, and I do think it's a vehicle to help the U.S. companies in the long run. So sure, there's that element. I'm not going to ignore that.
All right. Tracy, we have seen a lot of our friends out of work. Is this an opportunity maybe to take some of those folks, and not just the young folks who come out of college, but maybe older folks, and have them join the AI Tech Corps and help promote and ship some of our technology around the world? But is this some way to start using those folks if we can't find a way to employ them somewhere else?
Okay, so I hate to say this, but in some way I feel this is a bit naive. Most of us most really good technologists don't really understand where we're going with AI right now, or how to really implement it. So, and what I understood was that the goal was kind of three sectors: agriculture, healthcare, and education. I may be wrong, but that's, I believe, John, what your article indicated.
Yeah.
So those areas certainly could use the help, but how? How are they going? What kind of diplomacy are they taking? Are they going to try to rewrite healthcare? Are they going into low, organizations that are not funded, that may be good startups that are addressing AI and healthcare and agriculture and education? So I'm struggling with seeing how it will be implemented, and the people who are being pushed out there as these diplomats, so to speak. How skilled are they? Are they going to be coming right out of college? And most of the really good AI students are getting picked up. They don't have problems right now with jobs. So I'm feeling a little confused about
yeah. Your confusion is well grounded, because there was a little like a lot of these programs or plans is kind of light on the details, right? We don't know that in terms of logistics. It's like everything else that has been going on of late is like, it's just really hard to track who'll do what and when they're going to do it, and what specifically are they going to bring to these countries. So it's just I think it's a concept. I hate to, but it's a noble concept. I think I hope it is. But we'll see. It might even just dissolve and disintegrate for all we know.
I mean, there's we have history that shows that this can work. But it's not been in this technical of an area, right? Like Teach for America. Teach for America brought a lot of new teachers into the fold. So it can potentially work. I'm wondering who these highly skilled folks are going to be.
Yeah, I mean, full disclosure. I mean, before I married my wife, she was thinking of going to Kenya to help build water wells. And that was kind of the type of projects they did. This was in Kenya. And it's a quantum leap, as you said, to go from education, healthcare, agriculture to something as diffuse and as complicated as this. So there is a reason for pause. Yes.
And have you met a developer? I mean, they probably wouldn't go to Kenya and dig wells. I mean, come on. They're usually
This is like idealistic solid
competitive.
students.
Yeah, they're,
Jack,
they're
is this,
hockey players.
Jack, is this a good idea? But maybe we should change who's responsible for it. Does it really belong to something like the United Nations, so we can maybe take a little politics out of this thing, whether it's China or the U.S. or wherever? Let's find somebody maybe more neutral.
I don't think there's any neutrality in any of this. So you're tickling the cynic in me. Come on. Oh, no, the UN is not neutral either. So we'll just dispense with that and go to that. This is a program by the US for the benefit of the US with secondary benefit to other countries and other areas, just like the Peace Corps is by the US for the US with secondary benefit to everybody else.
And Peace Corps was in the midst of a Cold War too. So we were, hearts and minds. I mean,
it was very much the same thing. It was very much political. It was very much about exporting, God, country, the American flag, the ideals of democracy in areas that weren't established yet. And I don't think this is any different in terms of that level of goals and ideals. Is it currently half-baked? Yes. But then again, so is OpenAI's GitHub replacement is equally as half-baked and, as temporary. And I don't think, I don't know. I just feel like if we're going to beat up on this for being, a trial balloon and being half-baked, then we have to beat up on OpenAI for the same thing.
Well, I'm going to close it there because everything is half-baked, and that kind of makes sense to me. But
Everything is half-baked right now when it comes to AI. Everything. We're in a half-baked phase.
It's a work in progress.
It is.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would just remind everybody of some wisdom from Ronald Reagan, the 9 most dangerous words in the English language. Hi, I'm here from the government, and I'm here to help. Folks, thanks for watching Techstrong. We always appreciate your watching us live, and if you're watching us on a recorded version, thank you again as well. Please stay tuned for the rest of the Techstrong TV lineup, which has also been played earlier today, but we've got a whole second rendition of it coming up right behind this. And happy Friday and have a great weekend.
Now you've made some decisions architecturally, product selection. You now have a real network. You don't get to build a greenfield. We're just going to build this fresh and new with no legacy. You have the historic brownfield migration scenario here. So you had to take this very carefully. Why don't you talk us through what did those brownfield migrations look like? Knowing that you aren't directly on the ops team, I'm sure you had a lot of involvement in designing the process and being sensitive to what could go wrong here.
Nokia is a group of many companies that have merged into Nokia.
Sure. Yep.
So that's why you find that those different companies were not using the original Nokia router equipment.
Sure.
So they might be using other vendors because they were not related to us.
And I think you had at least 2 different vendors in the legacy environment, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, we do.
To non-Nokia, 2 different non-Nokia vendors. Yep.
2 different non-Nokia vendors. And so we have existing data centers with existing applications, and they're running, and we needed to move them into this common modern data center architecture, based on NetOps and stuff like that, and based on EDA and SR Linux. So we had to migrate all these different data centers from their original equipment and original management platforms to EDA and SR Linux without outages, without causing any outages. So we had to our data centers were at some time, and they are still in some cases interconnected to different vendors at the same time. So some of the servers in our SR Linux in the environment are actually on the same subnets, for example, on the same network as the servers in the other vendors' environment, and they are talking with each other as if as if they're just as if they're together in one data center.
Excellent.
And so we've developed this. Of course, the first time it was very interesting and challenging, but I think we mastered this to the extent now it's like become routine. There's another data center we have to migrate. Therefore, we connect our SR Linux EDA data center to it, and we begin migrating. And then we go through a process where we build a network across the two data centers and move servers one by one without even the application team shouldn't really. I mean, we're not telling that. Of course, we tell them we're migrating, but we really tell them you shouldn't see any disruption. Your application shouldn't be affected in the. So we move their servers from one environment to another without them actually seeing effect. So this is one kind of brownfield,
Sure.
where, and there's another kind of brownfield, where we had to replace, legacy management platform from prior Nokia companies and we had to do this in one shot, because we thought, okay, why don't we have the opportunity? It was running SR Linux by itself, but what the management platform was different. So we took that and we actually, in one maintenance window, moved all the data center from one management platform, which actually required, reconfiguring every single node in the data center to look for the new. And we did this with no hits as well. So it really, of course, the digital twin here, the migration with the digital twin is very important. Why? Because the digital twin enables you to look at specific. Now you need to go down to the node level, the CLI level, and make sure that every port, every subnet, every VLAN in what it was in the previous life is actually this gonna be that. It has exactly the same configuration. Of course, different type of configuration, but the same members, same subnets, same everything in the new data center. So the digital twin enabled us to make this comparison, and we did some automation, of course, to compare them together. But the digital twin was very critical in that, because we couldn't make mistakes in any node, and every single node had to have the correct configuration. Otherwise, you get an outage.
Have you ever thought about, how did I get along, for years or decades doing all this stuff without digital twin support? It's one of these, pieces of tooling that is just a game changer. It's fascinating to me.
I mean, you see, you're saying it's fascinating, but go to a common network engineer, and they'll tell you, I'm confident with CLI. I like CLI. I can understand. I know what I'm doing. I can see what I'm implementing. They're not used to this idea of hiding the complexity from you, or using modern techniques like, let's put it like a software development cycle. So it actually wasn't so you're thinking back now, we were thinking, oh, that's great, how did we live without it? But when we started, we got a lot of opposition. You guys are going to mess up. We've never done this before. This has not been done before. It's going to be a disaster. This is our factories, our product lines. Don't do it, because they're used to do it in a certain way. And our architecture was completely, a revolution to everything that what it was in the previous life. So thinking backwards, it makes sense. But when you're beginning, it was a lot of resistance,
Yeah. No, totally understood. And I think so many of us, have been trained to, just like you said earlier in our conversation, I've got to go get the equipment in the lab and test it in the lab before I'll believe before I'll trust putting this into production. And, this digital twin functionality in EDA now brings you to that much higher level where I don't need to invest in that equipment in the lab. I don't need to go physically cable that up or make sure somebody's there to do it for me. So
Conference season is upon us and RSAC is coming up soon. But what are the things that are going to be discussed? And are they going to include AI? This week, a very challenging episode. We are going to be talking about all things related to security that don't involve AI. Welcome to the Tech Field Day podcast, where we bring together a group of IT technical experts to discuss a single idea about key concepts in the industry. This podcast features a variety of perspectives from members of the Tech Field Day delegate community and is often associated in association with one of our events. Tech Field Day is a part of the Featuring Group, and this podcast is also published on our sister company's website, Techstrong TV. On this episode, we're going to be discussing security, but before we get to that, I want to have a chance for our guests to introduce themselves so you know who you're listening to, starting with Drew.
Hey, I'm Drew Conry Murray. I am with Packet Pushers. We are a tech podcast outfit covering the IT industry. You can hear me co-hosting our Heavy Networking, Network Break, and Packet Protector podcasts.
Hi, I'm Jack Pauler. I am CEO and Principal Analyst for Paradigm Technica. We are a cybersecurity industry analyst and research firm.
And of course, I am Tom Hollingsworth, event lead here at Tech Field Day. Let's jump into the premise for this episode. No doubt you have been hearing a lot about security, especially from me if you've tuned into our Security Boulevard podcast. But today I wanted to bring on a couple of my friends from the industry who are going to be joining me at the RSAC conference this year to talk a little bit about some of the bigger trends in security. And I gave them a challenge before we started with this because I didn't want to talk about AI stuff necessarily, because I know that we talk about that a lot. So the premise for this episode is that security in 2026 is more than just AI. So I'm going to kind of throw this out here to you gentlemen, because, I know, Jack, you live in the security world, and Drew, you do a lot of security podcasts with our friend JJ. What are some of the trends that you're seeing in security that kind of stand out to you that don't necessarily have to do directly with securing against prompt injection or dealing with rogue agents?
Well, I think one of the important things to consider is we are really starting to see the implementation of zero trust. And zero trust is all about identity. And I hate to use this term. It's another one like those forbidden words, but identity is the new perimeter. And really what we're seeing is a big shift from looking at place and time to be controlling how you access resources to identity being controlling how you access resources. And I think that trend is important because we're just moving so quickly with everything we're doing. And the cloud has sort of erased our concept of a boundary. Physical boundary, location boundary, time boundary. So I think we need to rethink everything and move towards this.
Yeah, I'm seeing that, as well as a kind of a renewed interest in sort of the endpoint, and in particular the browser. A lot of activity around trying to secure the browser in various ways, either by delivering a custom secure browser or putting controls in so that you have some visibility into and control over extensions and what people are up to in the browser and the endpoint in general. I think in part it's been driven by issues around things like, malicious NPM packages, IDE extensions, browser extensions that start off looking like a useful tool, and then, the malware creator lets them sort of get adopted and then flips the evil bit, and suddenly your endpoint is compromised.
Never flip the evil bit, unless you want to be RFC evil bit compliant, which used to hang on my door, by the way. It was great because I just moved a little magnetic slider over to warn people if I was feeling evil that day. But you both bring up really interesting points, and I will, small plug for everybody out there. We had both examples of both of those at our previous Security Field Day event in the fall of 2025, where we talked to 1Password, who had a really great example of talking about some of the identity-based stuff that they're dealing with, but also from SquareX, which is a secure browser company that actually was just recently acquired by Zscaler, which I thought was a really interesting pickup for them as they kind of work their SASE SSE magic. I want to dive into that second topic first, Drew, the idea behind the secure browser, because this is one of the things that a lot of people have been talking about for years. If anybody remembers the horror that was Internet Explorer 4 with all of those browser helper objects and all of those ActiveX controls that were embedded into the browser, and oh my God, what are you doing? And hey, Netscape Navigator still works, and it still has its own foibles, but we've been fighting the browser wars for a long time, and it looked like at least for the foreseeable future, Chromium was going to win out. And then we started piling security pieces on top of it as we started kind of turning the browser less into a functional piece of software just designed to browse web pages and more into effectively a user portal. And we didn't just see that from companies that were building these objects in. If you look at things like Arc and Brave and other consumer focused browsers, like they were doing all kinds of crazy stuff to, provide additional functionality and stuff like that. But that never really carried into the enterprise until today, where we're seeing like most of the applications that we're using are web-based. Like it's whether or not they're using a web functionality like Safari or a Chrome, or they're just a rebuilt Electron app. I mean, that's for those of you out there who use Slack, guess what, kids? That's basically a custom browser. But if you have something that can install itself into Electron, then you basically create a secure front end. Do you see, kind of also bringing Jack's point in here, do you see that as a way to kind of control the identity crisis? We have a lot of users who are accessing all of these software pieces from all over the world, and we need a way to basically kind of funnel them into a choke point, and that becomes a browser that's running an extension that allows us to do security right there.
Yeah, I guess my impression is that in the past, the primary risk from the browser was, are your employees going to be shopping or looking at naughty sites, time wasting, exposing you to either time wasting risks or some kind of liability from looking at things they shouldn't be looking at. Now, because the browser is essentially a productivity tool, it's your gateway to a bunch of corporate apps with lots of sensitive data. The attention now is, I think, that's driven the attention of executives who are like, oh yeah, this is a huge risk. And we're actually seeing attackers exploit the browser as a way in. So that choke point used to be the firewall. Now we're bringing it right down to the endpoint. In terms of it, I don't know that there's so much of an identity play in the browser, but it is definitely, we need to see what folks are running on the browser, what folks are doing in the browser. And again, with encryption, most traffic being encrypted now, the browser is kind of the only place you can really get deep visibility into that traffic as it leaves the enterprise.
One of the interesting things is, when browsers first came out, and I don't know, 30 some odd years ago with Netscape Navigator.
You're dating yourself,
so,
Jack.
having worked at Netscape when it first came out, I can talk about this a little bit. We talked at that time about the browser being the universal user interface. And for a very long time, it was trending that way. It didn't make sense to develop your own full-blown user interface. Instead, use the browser, and that eliminated a lot of development effort. I think what we're seeing now is we're starting to sort of see a trend starting very slowly to move away from that, because there are certain things you just can't do in a browser that you need a specific user interface for. And there are a lot of things that are now happening that don't go over an HTTP or HTTPS port. So instead of you're communicating on 443, you're seeing it where it's a private communication API to API from one of those, and I'm going to say it, Tom, an AI type environment, but not thinking about the AI part, just thinking about more the user interaction is. And I think Drew, you said it early on, it's really more the endpoint, and the endpoint is now becoming more in focus. And I think very soon we're going to start realizing that it's not just the browser we have to worry about. There are so many other ways users are using the endpoints to communicate with corporate and enterprise applications and services. And more importantly, the endpoint is now when we think about traditional endpoint security, we really think about it as your PC primarily, and your Apple laptop, your Mac secondarily. And I think now the younger generations are starting to become very much mobile first and mobile dependent, and the endpoint security on mobile devices is still way, 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 way behind where we are on desktop PCs and laptops. And I think we need that we're going to very quickly have a problem there that we need to think about.
This is why people pay Jack the big bucks, folks, is because he got to the point I was going to bring up before I ever got there. I think that where we're at right now, especially when it comes to identity and security, is people like us, I'll just say that because we are over the age of 30, comfortably. We have a very unique concept of what an endpoint is. Like I was literally telling somebody yesterday about when I was an intern at IBM, and I took a walk with somebody because he was like, "Hey, I want to test this cool thing and I want to check my email." I'm like, "You can't. Your desktop is back at your desk." He goes, "No, I have this thing called a BlackBerry, and it runs over wireless Ethernet." And I'm like, "Cool." And today, my kids, and because my son is 20, and now his generation, they're kind of coming into the workforce, they don't like laptops. They want to run off of tablets or phones. Like the whole idea of having a place where you go to do stuff, or having a 4-pound slug of aluminum that you carry around with you, is foreign to them. And that has changed the way that people do their software, right? Even on like a Mac or a Windows PC, it is an app, not a software program. So they're trying to provide the same user interface that you might see on a mobile tablet or a mobile phone. And that creates its own challenges. Kind of, Jack, to your point, I think one of the reasons why people have moved away from using browsers as the standard user portal, in a way, is because we've secured them too well, because they're sandboxed now. They can't really affect anything else going on in the system because so many people have exploited it for so long. And so we're treating the endpoint as the identity piece, right? Because love them or hate them, Apple really does a terrible job of creating multiple user identities on their mobile devices. If I'm on a phone, it's my phone. If I'm on a tablet, it's my tablet. In fact, the only thing that Apple makes that is really good at transferring identities is the Apple TV, because you can have different people logging into the Apple TV. I think we might see that in the future as kind of like an enterprise level thing for like maybe like a host stand, or like student identities checking in and out of an iPad. But by and large, like, we know that if someone's on an iPad and it says like Jack's iPad, that's Jack, right? So we can enforce Jack's security policy, but the design of the OS does not allow us to do that. So we're kind of fighting our way uphill, because iOS is like, "Oh no, you can't do that. Oh, you want to run your own browser? Well, it's really Safari under the hood." And so people have been like challenged to come up with ways to prevent security incidents from an increasingly mobile workforce, where I don't have visibility into that at all. Like an iPad might as well be an island.
I think there's another thing, and Drew, I'm really glad that you brought this topic up, because there's another aspect to it, and you alluded to it with the browser and talking about browser plugins. And that's very critical, because one of the things we've seen with browser plugins is a developer will provide, do some open source or free plugin, and people start using it. And then either, as Tom mentioned, the developer will flip the evil switch, or more likely somebody else takes over that development effort, and they are the evil people who just sort of come in and take over what's going on. So we have a browser extension problem. But as we move out of the browser and we start having custom applications, a lot of these applications are also plugin enabled. So they have the ability to add feature functionality to them from third parties. And we don't, unlike Apple in the browser, in the iOS environment, we don't have a walled garden in all of these plugins. So we, again, have this ability for people to create what appear to be benign plugins that are really have the evil switch flipped under the hood and are really malicious underneath. And so the security landscape and the footprint becomes that much larger, and our threat exposure becomes that much larger. And I think, there's a lot going on at RSA, but I'm not sure people are really focusing on this, because I think we're too over-rotated onto thinking about AI and what AI is going to do for us.
I will say, I know recently Palo Alto Networks acquired a company called Koi for, I think, $400 million, and that's right in their wheelhouse, just starting to give you visibility into what kinds of extensions and packages are my employees downloading and using. It's sort of like the old, back to virus and malware lists, but for NPMs and extensions and so on.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges that people are always going to face, right? Is you have to give attention to the squeakiest wheel in the room. And sometimes that is identity security. And sometimes that's the identity of a software package running autonomously on your network, deleting all of your emails because you told it to.
Or you didn't tell it not to.
And how do you guard against that? Right. Or even when you're telling it not to, it's ignoring you, just like a junior intern who doesn't know any better. And I feel like some of the security pieces that we're starting to see are, and this is a great conversation we had on Security Boulevard, was you're trying to get the human out of the loop because the human is actually creating problems here. And I know, like, we had a really great presentation from Dave Meyer when he worked back at Brocade years and years ago at Networking Field Day, where he said, eventually the system will only be as robust as the number of people in it. You have to get people out of the loop. And now what we're starting to see is that the people in the loop who are constantly going back and checking up on the agents that are running are creating problems. And this was something that Mitch Ashley from the Future Group brought up. He said, eventually what we're going to have to do is instead of asking the human for permission to do things, we're going to have the agent do the thing and then tell the human later, hey, I did all this stuff. You're okay with it, right? Because security is getting to the point where the time between vulnerability detection and exploitation has shrunk from weeks to days. And I'm going to guess sometime in the next couple of years, it's going to shrink to hours for some of these vulnerabilities because you have something doing effectively multiplicative exploit capability, right? Where, oh, I found this. Let me go dispatch like 1,000 agents to go see where it's exploitable. Log on to Shodan, and all of a sudden I have like a whole bunch of stuff that I can figure out. And like that's the scalability problem is what we're going to run into because unfortunately humans don't scale.
Well, you're right that humans don't scale, but the interesting thing there is talking about vulnerabilities is half of the puzzle. And I read about this last week, or maybe it was earlier this week, in relation again to AI, where we think about a lot of what we think about in security is either vulnerabilities or network access, and it's an attacker coming in from the outside. However, when you actually look at what's going on in the world, half or more of attacks are based on identity and getting somebody access to somebody's identity. And that's whether it's social engineering or stolen identities or the fact that the default password was never changed for you never set a password, or your password is PASSWR at D1, right? Or you have to do frequent password rotation. So you just add a number and increment that all the time. So all of those issues relate to humans and human gullibility and the ability to manipulate humans. And no matter how much we try to take humans out of the loop, humans are involved. This is a human-oriented, businesses are all about people, not about the machines, unless you're building the machine, right? So how do we deal with social engineering and identity attacks? And if we ignore that part of the puzzle, we focus only on, we can do all we want in the world on code security and evaluating code and network security and all these other aspects and endpoint security and eliminating malicious packages. But if the guy's going to fall for, hey, you've won $1 million, give me your username, your password, and your first date of birth, and your mother's maiden name, if you can't get past that, then we're leaving half of the landscape uncovered. And I think identity is going to be the other part of the puzzle that's going to be a big thing at RSA.
No, I agree. And mea culpa, I'm just going to admit this to my entire listening public. I almost fell for a phishing attack the other day because it came from somebody that I recognized the email. And I'm like, oh, maybe this is something they need me to take a look at. And as soon as I clicked on it, it wanted me to log in with my Google address. I was like, wait a minute. Something doesn't smell right here. And then when I mentioned it to the person, you know what their response was? Who in the hell uses Zoom docs? Like that was their and then of course I'm like, you got a point. Nobody does that. And that's the problem we're running into is we have taught people the basics, right? Like, don't give out your PII on a phone call, or don't just answer the emails that people send you. Check all the links. But I checked the links and they looked legitimate. It's just the way that we're hitting a thing like, oh, I haven't logged into that system for 20 years. Like obviously I must reset my password to get in there. Oh, wait, no, you're harvesting information now. And I think that's where people are kind of figuring out, like, you can't bust in through the front door, but you can come in through the smoking door if you're paying attention. And for those of you who are in your 20s, the smoking door used to be the unsecured door in the building where the smokers got to go out and have a cigarette. And there are tons and tons of stories about penetration testers who slipped in there because they had a pack of cigarettes and nobody asked questions.
Yeah, Jack, I think you're right to talk about identity as being one of the great unsolved problems, and it's just getting worse as we throw agentic AI in there. But also, social engineering has been an issue basically since the dawn of computing, and I don't see it going away. And in some ways, LLMs make it easy for maybe non-native language speakers who are attacking a specific country or user group to craft even better, more effective social engineering messages.
Right. And we have developed ways to eliminate some of the risks with social engineering. So we've moved from password-based authentication to passwordless, where you use two-factor authentication is still easy to be socially engineered, but when you use passkeys, FIDO passkeys, it's a lot harder to break into. There's no known compromise right now. It's very hard to social engineer it. It's very locked down. And yet most companies I deal with are still, most enterprises today, and they barely make MFA mandatory, let alone go to this new technology. And I don't understand, given the breadth of capabilities we have, the number of vendors at RSA who are going to be talking about this, why is it so hard to get people to put the very simplest lock and key? They'll spend $1 billion on advanced, zero-day protections and endpoint protection and this, that, and the other, and they still allow people to log in with basic password protection, it's essentially meaningless. And I don't understand. I wish there was some way at the RSA conference that could be, we could spend an entire year just saying, lock the front door.
Maybe it's because there's not a great way for security companies to make money off of passkeys is could be the issue. I'm being a little cynical, but that could be part of it.
Drew the Senate comes out again. Boy, we haven't seen him in a while. Now, Drew, you bring up a really good point. A lot of it is driven by basically by investment potential, right? It's the old the people who distrust doctors and pharmacists because they're like, well, why would I cure you when I can just sell you a solution to your symptoms?
Don't lump me into anti-vax or anything, Tom.
No. I'm not. I'm definitely not. But what I'm saying is there's always going to be this suspicion amongst people that I'm not going to use the most secure thing because then it's a solved problem. But I think that the issue that we're running into here is that there is so much reticence from the traditional security people to upset any apple cart. Remember when NIST came out a couple of years ago with the guidance that you shouldn't just change your password every 60 days because it didn't really matter. It was actually better to keep the same password, just make sure it's kind of strong, because constant password changes cause people to want to jot them down and stuff like that. Do you remember the uproar in the community? It was very clear drawing the battle lines. It's half of everybody is yeah, I guess that works because for the reasons they stated. And the other group are oh my God, no, if your password's older than your underwear, then you have to get rid of it. And how can we still disagree on something like that? And don't get me wrong, I passkey everything I touch because it is, to me, the most secure form of providing that. In fact, when something doesn't pop up and offer me a passkey, hello, Salesforce, I get worried. And that kind of goes that hand in hand with things of I guess a password dialogue is comforting to people because they're oh, I can just type my password in. Or okay, who types their password in anymore? They use a password manager.
It's always hard to change people's workflows. You get resistance, you get pushback, and there may be systems in an enterprise that aren't able to support passkeys, and then you're working with dual systems, and that's a nightmare to manage.
Yeah, I think you're 100% spot on that there is a lot of inertia involved, and it is, as you noted, it's passkeys are very, very important, but not very, very profitable. And, as I work with a lot of cybersecurity vendors, and it's always easy to tout and talk about the shiny new toy, right? We've got this new thing and that new thing. And, and we've been doing MFA for a decade now, and MFA is, it's sort of passé now. We don't talk about it. It's just sort of there. It's table stakes, but we also don't make it mandatory. And, it needs to be, these things need to be, if the new vendors on the block started with developing their systems by never offering you the choice of passwords, and only give you the choice of passkeys, we would be better off. But even the brand new vendors who are cybersecurity vendors still build their SaaS apps with a username and password. And I just think that, that to me, I wish that was part of the RSA conversation in the community. The theme of RSA this year is all about community and bringing people together, and the attackers work as a community, right? We have all these different cartels that are various groups of people that do things on the attacker side, and they coordinate and they cooperate. And it would be really nice if on the vendor side and the defender side, we behaved much more as a real community and said, not only are these best practices that we advise you to do, we're going to eat our own dog food, and we're going to force you to do it by not allowing you to register for this thing, whatever this thing is, or we're going to eliminate this. Here's our phase out plan over time to eliminate passwords from our application. So you better get used to it and get ready for it.
We just talked about a couple of weeks ago, I think, on a Packet Protector episode about Windows mentioning that, hey, NTLM is eventually going to go away, right? And that's been an issue for decades, but because of legacy applications and legacy systems, they have to be very deliberate and very careful in finally getting rid of it. So yeah, it's absolutely just it's a great point, Jack, and I really do wish vendors would eat their own dog food and start to push their customers and the market in that direction. That would be really fantastic.
We could record a whole episode about sunsetting technologies. Like, on the one hand, you've got Windows who are like, hey, listen, for real, before 3000, we're going to get rid of NTLM. And on the other hand, you've got companies like Apple who are like, well, you don't need a floppy drive. And you're always kind of trying to find that comfortable balance of when do I start sunsetting technologies versus when do I just jump right out there and say it's got to go. I think that the challenge, though, is that a lot of companies have used some traditional technologies to kind of solve security problems. And when you sunset those technologies without a clear roadmap to basically give them an option to change what they're doing, it causes a lot of friction. It's like, oh yeah, well, you didn't have a mechanism for us to be able to do that through the API back in the day. So like we routed it through an SMB1 share. And you're like, why on earth would you do that? Because you're like, well, in the early 2000s, it's all we had. And so you kind of have to build on things, because again, it comes back to the whole, this is a solved problem and I don't need to work on it anymore until it's not a solved problem, because instead of a better solution coming out, we're getting rid of the solution that you built. And security people need to get much, much better at that. So all of my security friends who are out there, do not get mad when people move your cheese. Anybody who ever read that book is giggling right now. All right, so I'm gonna turn this around and I'm gonna ask you guys, what do you think is your one big prediction for RSA? Like, when we're recording the post RSA podcast and people are talking about, oh, did you see this? Oh, did you see that? What is the one big thing coming out of it that you think is going to kind of change the trajectory or further the trajectory of what we're seeing in 2026?
Well, I'll say that the challenge I have with answering that question is right now, I don't think the vendors are in big picture mode. I don't think they're focused on any one big thing that's going to change the way we think about the industry. I think everybody right now is in shiny new toy mode. Is come look at me. I've got this cool little thing, and we've really avoided the topic for a long time. But it's all going to be about AI, and I made a challenge to myself last year, and I think it's going to be even harder this year, which is to walk the conference expo hall, which is going to have 500-600 vendors in it, and to find the few booths that don't actually have AI plastered all over the booth, right? And are actually talking about, this is the very specific problem we're solving for you, not we're pasting AI on top of our product. And for me, that's really the key. Is now I'm all about AI and understanding the impact of AI for security and how you secure AI, but still there's a whole lot that happens without AI for a whole lot of enterprises and smaller companies that we need to be thinking about and securing, particularly around identities. And the challenge is finding those technologies for me.
I mean, maybe one good thing that could come out of this focus on AI, given, the rise of agentic AI with these, sort of autonomous entities running around doing things, that's an identity and access management problem. And if people think it's big enough, maybe that will help us get our arms around AI identity more broadly as an industry and a community and help drive some change.
For my part, I think what we're going to see is a lot of companies that are going to start beating the drum of reduced time to vulnerability exploitation. Like they'll probably put AI all over it because that's what sells right now. But they're gonna start saying, like, if something's been reported, just assume that it's already being actively breached. Don't try to hope against hope. And maybe that's going to solve some of our problems, right? Like maybe the technical advisory board has to meet an extra day this month to approve the patches to go out, or maybe we start trusting automated deployment systems to do that. But like, I mean, Drew, you and I both run weekly news podcasts, and oh my God, if we actually just posted all of the vulnerabilities that we did, we could make a podcast out of that, which by the way is, Risky Business is a great podcast basically for that. If you want to go listen to Patrick Gray. But like, there are so many things that we have to deal with on a daily basis. And it's not like low level stuff. Like these are like, CVSS like 9+ all the freaking time. And I think that we've got to get better about detecting and remediating those things. And if that involves using non-human coworkers to do that, then great. But otherwise, I mean, what can you do? All right. These two gentlemen do a lot of writing. They do a lot of content creation. I want to give them an opportunity to tell everyone out there where you can find what they're doing. So, Jack, if people want to check out some of the stuff you've been creating.
You can find my content on my website at paradigmtechnica.com or LinkedIn and the usual social sites, as well as I do write a column for Security Boulevard.
You can find our podcasts at packetpushers.net. I also do blog about the industry on packetpushers.net. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I'm also on Blue Sky at Drew_CM.
And I produce a lot of security content, not only here at Tech Field Day, but also as part of the Security Boulevard podcast with my co-hosts, Alan Schimmel, Fernando Montenegro, and Mitch Ashley. And don't forget that we at Tech Field Day are going to be at RSAC for the first time this year. And we're going to be getting great presentations from companies like Veeam, Object First, and Commvault. If you head over to techfieldday.com, you can see more information about that. And I know we're going to have some great content, both video, audio, and written coming out of that. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Tech Field Day podcast. If you enjoyed this discussion, please do us a favor, subscribe on YouTube or in your favorite podcast application, because we don't want you to miss any of our episodes. If you do that, please consider leaving us a rating, a review, and possibly a comment so that we know you enjoy the content that you're seeing. This podcast is brought to you by Tech Field Day, the home for IT experts from across the enterprise, which is a part of the Futurum Group. For upcoming events and more episodes, you know what to do. Head over to techfieldday.com/podcast or check us out on Techstrong TV, including the Techstrong TV app that runs on iOS devices, set-top boxes, and pretty much everywhere. In fact, install it in your doctor's office because we want them to check out our podcast too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
Hi, I'm Mitch Ashley with the Futurum Group. Today we're unpacking the Nokia Bell Labs recently developed model for data center fabric reliability. Now we'll look at how the fabric design plus operations, especially automation and AI ops, can move enterprises from a legacy PMO baseline to an FMO with Nokia's SR Linux and event-driven automation, EDA, or we call it EDA, that can exceed 5.19's availability and shrink downtime significantly.
And I'm Scott Robon with Solutional. It's the age of operations. Hardware still matters, but operations dominate outcomes, day 2 and beyond. This Bell Labs model includes significant detail, and today we'll zoom in on some key areas in operations. We'll also touch on the significant financial impact as well. The model shows that reliability gains can result in real cost reduction. And that should be no surprise to those of us who've been, in the ops world for some time.
Very good. Well, the model treats configuration NetOps as one of the main areas for improvement, including common cause failures. So what does it mean in practice, Scott?
The model shows the most significant reduction in downtime, measured in absolute terms, minutes eliminated per year, is achieved during the config and provisioning phase, driven by decrease in config-related errors. There are multiple key components and mechanisms in the Nokia solution at the heart of the model. First, you have SR Linux, the operating system developed for modern data center operations. It facilitates efficient, structured, and language-agnostic comms between system components, minimizing operational complexity and reducing the likelihood of user error. Next, you've got features like ZTP, zero-touch provisioning, which are integral to EDA, that further eliminate manual intervention, takes the human out of the loop for opportunities to inject errors, and contributing to that enhanced reliability for operational efficiency. And then there's EDA's digital twin construct that provides like-for-like environment to design and validate network configs with correct intent inputs. This minimizes config and provisioning errors, and the configs generated in the digital twin directly mirror production. That's not special configs in the twin and then modified to push in production. It's actually the same configurations. Reliability is further enforced and improved by EDA's built-in dry run validation routines prior to every config being pushed into the network, helping ensure accuracy and consistency before changes are put into the live network.
Now, you mentioned the term age of operations. So talk to us about why is ops a primary lever in this model?
At the simplest level, once you stand up a data center fabric, most of the day-to-day work in NetOps is around operations and monitoring. And with AI ops entering the room here, we have a day one killer app that drives the use for NetOps, natural language processing. I can talk to the fabric to see what's going on. We also benefit from increased programmatic access to the fabric. For example, SR Linux provides a single API for set, get, and streaming telemetry, resulting in less operational complexity and minimizing misconfigs. That programmatic telemetry from SR Linux feeds into EDA to detect and act quickly. And that's what lifts the fabric reliability to over 5.19s when all these features are combined. From a network operating system architecture perspective, the event handling system in SR Linux and EDA is capable of proactive predefined actions based on things like port saturation, packet drops, looking at other network conditions to automatically trigger corrective actions and prevent network degradation and mitigate issues before they occur.
So putting that all together, it sounds like what you're saying is tools operationalize good design.
That's a really good summary of a very long description, Mitch. Exactly. Design gives you redundancy. Operations makes it reliable every day.
The details matter for sure. So planned work can still hurt availability. How does the model address that? And SR Linux in particular and EDA, how do they handle ongoing maintenance, such as upgrades, patches, the things that we commonly do?
We need to point out the fact that SR Linux uses an unmodified Linux kernel. This is what the rest of the world is using for Linux. That gives you the ability to tap into a worldwide community of developers hammering away at it every day, identifying potential performance and security issues across many, many different application areas, not just networking. In addition to that, EDA provides built-in capabilities to ensure network reliability during maintenance operations. You can use the platform to gracefully drain traffic from a node and put nodes into maintenance mode, preventing service disruptions, minimizing traffic loss. EDA also centralizes and streamlines the upgrade process. When a router's locked and is ready to reboot, it significantly reduces the actual maintenance window. EDA also gives you group-based upgrades and stage promotion to shrink maintenance windows, reduce the time used for maintenance windows, and limit that blast radius. You can pick targeted nodes, you can automate pre and post checks, and you can roll forward only when your process gates get passed. Altogether, these features result in enhanced reliability and minimized downtime. All the upgrade steps can be tested with the EDA digital twin functionality in a like-to-like environment. This is what gives you impact and reduces maintenance issues for far less annual downtime as you move from your present mode of operation to your future mode of operation.
Excellent. So who should people talk to at Nokia to see how this model can apply to their environment, their data center network?
Well, to learn more about the model, SR Linux, and EDA, contact your Nokia account team or your regional business center contacts, and they'll work with you to work through the details.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate you sharing us some interesting facts from the study.
You bet. Thanks, Mitch.
NVIDIA's fiber diet, open claw flaw? Pshaw. Microsoft plugs up their pipeline. Porque ChatGPT. Google does the robot. iCloud use. Accenture looks at Ookla. Qualcomm wows at MWC and more in this week's episode of the Tech Field Day Rundown. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tech Field Day Rundown. Hey, we're almost to spring. Unless it's 85 degrees outside, in which case we're practically to summer. But another thing you need to keep in mind is that you have to be grammatically correct whenever you do all of the things, since it's National Grammar Day. And it's a day that's near and dear to my heart, unless I end a sentence with a preposition, in which case I'm going to get yelled at. But not by my co-host, Mr. Alistair Cook. Al, welcome to the show once again.
Welcome, Tom, and I would never yell at you remotely. I would have to be there with you in person for yelling, particularly on National Sons Day. I personally don't have any sons, although I am, of course, a son, but celebrating today all of the sons of the world.
Yes, it's National Sons Day on a Wednesday, but one thing that isn't going to change, no matter what day of the week it is all of the news that we're going to be bringing to you, because it has been a very busy week. And we're going to start off with our friends over at NVIDIA, because they are doubling down on AI infrastructure with a $4 billion investment in two different companies, $2 billion each to Lumentum and Coherent. The move strengthens NVIDIA's position in advanced photonics, a critical technology for next-generation AI supercomputing that uses light instead of electrical signals to move massive amounts of data. Everyone's favorite CEO in walking leather jacket, Jensen Huang, called it part of the largest computing infrastructure build-out in history. As rivals like AMD and Meta ramp up their own AI investments, NVIDIA is securing long-term access to optical capacity that is needed to power AI's facilities tomorrow. Al, I know there's been a lot of talk about using fiber everywhere. Is NVIDIA kind of doing an end run around people that don't realize they're going to need it very soon?
I think that's very much what NVIDIA is trying to do here. So they've thrown some money. I mean, $4 billion is a lot of money to you and I, Tom, but to NVIDIA, it's not really that big of an investment compared to the other money that they've spent. So these investments are in a couple of silicon photonics companies, and the investments are going to help those companies with R&D. Both Lumentum and Coherent have made commitments around more R&D and more R&D onshore in the United States, which of course suits the current political climate quite well. There's also some guaranteed availability of buying products. So in addition to giving these companies money or investing in these companies for their R&D work, there's also a commitment that NVIDIA can buy billions of dollars worth of the silicon photonics that come out of these development works. The aim with the silicon photonics, and it's been around for a while. I know I've seen other vendors talking about silicon photonics for at least 10 or 15 years. The idea is to move away from using those electrical signals where the propagation and the cost and the particularly power that's required to move large amounts of data can be very limiting. Move towards a scenario where we're using light being sent through fiber rather than electrical signals sent through copper. I think this is a very significant element of protecting the future for NVIDIA. NVIDIA has had a very strong head start as being the most well-known brand for AI infrastructure, as they were the most well-known brand for crypto beforehand. But we are seeing a lot of investment in alternatives to NVIDIA We're seeing investments. We saw Meta investing $60 billion in a deal with AMD and Marvell. And so these are definitely, there's a maturing in the market, seeing that NVIDIA isn't necessarily the be all and end all. And I think this is very much a protective move for NVIDIA, making sure that they get the first bite at whatever the next silicon photonics technology is going to be around. Of course, you have other companies working on silicon photonics that might want to either take a cash injection or be ready to supply people who maybe aren't NVIDIA in the future. So no guarantees that this will protect them forever. A new vulnerability called Clawjacked allows malicious websites to silently hijack OpenClaw's locally hosted AI agents. By exploiting trusted localhost connections, attackers can brute force access, register rogue devices, and take full control, all without the user's interaction. Now, there's a patch available, but the issue highlights a bigger concern: powerful AI agents running with broad system access, very little oversight. Security experts say that organizations must govern AI agents like any other high-privileged identity. So we've now got an even more powerful kind of non-human entity, Tom.
We do. And to quote Battlestar Galactica, all of this has happened before and all of this will happen again. Because I was literally asked this weekend by someone who was probably, I don't know, 13 or 14 when they were talking about security. Why was it back in the day that web browsers could install all of this crap on your system? And for those of you who are old enough to remember a browser helper object, you know the kind of special hell that you had to deal with to get rid of those things, to avoid the 80,000 pop-ups that just wouldn't ever end on your screen. And eventually we had to do things like architecturally change the way that Internet Explorer worked by creating Chrome mostly, because Chrome doesn't suffer from a lot of those problems. Fast forward to today. What is the helper object that I'm corrupting? Oh, that would be the AI agent that I have given all of the privileges on my machine. And I feel like this particular flavor of Claw is going to be the story that keeps on giving in 2026. I mean, we've talked about it so much already, but it feels like every week someone kicks over another rock and it just scuttles away with more problems. Like, oh, I don't know, letting it run with pretty much root access on your system. Again, something I talked about this week when I was teaching people about cybersecurity. And I kind of half jokingly said, you know, there's no Linux antivirus because no one on Linux is dumb enough to run as root on a regular basis. And then I said, you know, there actually are Linux viruses, but they're a lot less targeted because the system tends to be hardened. But what if I ran an agent on top of the system that did have root access at all times? Or maybe it doesn't have root access to the system, it just has root access to my email and my bank accounts and all that other stuff. Boy, wouldn't that be a juicy, tempting thing to just crack open and siphon as much as I could? Yeah, it would, like siphoning drawn butter on top of lobster claws, for example, or crab claws, or whatever form of mollusk that you choose to eat. But the thing here is the experts are exactly right. You cannot assume that every piece of software on your system runs with the same level of privileges. Ironically enough, one of the reasons why you don't have this problem with browsers causing these issues now is because effectively most of them are sandboxed. They don't have the ability to affect other things on the system. Everything kind of lands in its own little playpen and it doesn't ever break out. It's just in this particular case, someone found a way to call a function that was probably listening in the web browser anyway and then corrupt it. So yeah, here's a fun fact, kids. You should secure software. Who knew? First principles and all that. Okay. Anyway, now I'm hungry for lobster. But before I get to my meal of lobster, I think we need to talk about a new ACM paper. And because Mark Rusinovich and Scott Hanselman of Microsoft caution that generative AI could unintentionally weaken the software engineering talent pipeline. They argue that agentic coding assistants amplify senior engineers while reducing opportunities for junior developers to gain critical experience by making mistakes. The result may be a seniority-based shift in hiring that narrows the traditional growth path from entry-level coder to technical leader. Their proposed solution, a structured mentorship model where AI tools are configured to support learning, not just productivity, ensuring the next generation of developers builds judgment and expertise that AI cannot replace. Al, I was watching a video recently where someone said, basically, the reason why you end up making senior engineer is because you screw a whole bunch of things up as a junior engineer. And with AI now, you won't be making those mistakes, which means you never get the experience you need to become a senior. Did the folks over at Microsoft finally figure out that that might actually happen?
Well, I think both Mike Russinovich, Scott Hanselman, they're very well respected in the community and within the industry, and they're pointing out something that's, I think, reasonably well known in the industry. And it is that when you eliminate the value of junior roles and only have value in senior roles, you make it very hard for people to become senior. And that doesn't matter how that comes about. In this case, it's coming about because AI tools are eliminating the junior roles. They're basically being able to make all of the mistakes that a junior engineer would make, rather than the junior engineer getting to make those mistakes. I think one of the elements is that it's telling us that there isn't going to be the same path that there has always been to go from a junior developer to being a senior developer. But maybe there's still a different path because the use of an AI agent to write things is a different way of approaching software development. And so the role of the junior engineer is going to be learning how to tell the AI agent to do its job well. And it still works the same way as you would have started with a developer. As a junior developer, you get to look after a small piece of code. Well, now you get to look after how you describe the function of that small piece of code to an AI agent. And so the role of the junior is shifting, but also the role of the senior is shifting. The senior engineer is still looking at more of a wider view architecture. And this is the place where AI agents, at the moment, coding agents tend to fall down, is with architectural view rather than straight up coding. Now, absolutely, in the article that Scott and Mark wrote, they talk about some of the mistakes that an AI coding agent will do that absolutely mirror what a junior developer will do. They talk about adding an arbitrary pause in a piece of code to avoid a race condition when there should be proper coding to actually prevent the race condition rather than avoid it showing up in the tests. So that kind of view that a junior engineer might just attack the symptoms and produce lots of technical debt, and that the senior engineer will attack the causal problem and prevent that accumulation of technical debt. The thing is that when we shift to AI generates most of our code and we just describe what it should do, right? So this is some of the sort of design-based driving of the AI agents. We care less about a bunch of the things that we used to care about deeply. So one of the elements in here is they talk about the code base re-implementing the same functions multiple times with these AI agents. And that leads to messy code. Well, when humans don't need to read the code, it doesn't matter so much if it's messy. Maybe we just embrace the fact that AI-generated code is the future, and we teach junior engineers to prompt the AI to actually write the descriptions well and have them move outwards from smaller pieces. I think the approach that the authors of the paper, Mark and Scott, proposed, which is that companies invest in the future by accepting less productivity out of their junior developers than they might want. In fact, possibly these junior developers will slow down even the senior developers. That's never going to fly in business. Because all of our companies are focused on what's the results for this quarter and this year, they're not going to invest in 5 to 10 years of developing a staff member. Particularly with the employment patterns we see, where staff are staying for 2, 3, 4 years at a company at most, and then moving to a new company. Where's the benefit to that first company in investing in making that developer a better developer when they're going to move on before they even get to the point of returning on that investment? So I think, yes, in an ideal world, we would have this practice where we're teaching junior developers to be better developers in the ways that we have in the past. But the reality is we need to embrace the fact that being a developer is different now than it was before these AI-generated coding tools turned up. Progressively, those tools will get better and we'll have less reliance on human judgment of the individual pieces of code. Researchers say that an attacker used AI chatbots, including both Anthropic's Claude and OpenAI's ChatGPT, to breach Mexican government networks and steal up to 150 gigabytes of sensitive data. According to findings highlighted in CrowdStrike's latest threat research and reported by Bloomberg, the hacker allegedly jailbroke Claude-generated exploit scripts, network weaknesses, and automated parts of the attack. The incident underscores a growing trend. Cybercriminals are using AI tools to accelerate their attacks, expand their reach, and target AI systems within the enterprise organization that provide a wonderful new attack surface. Tom, should we be worried and turning off AI everywhere?
I don't know that we can at this point because the toothpaste is out of that particular tube. And I love to see the intersection of two things that I was super worried about: using AI to accelerate the way that you attack things, and vulnerable nation states who are leaving themselves wide open. Oh, look, I got a bingo on my card. It's amazing how that works. This is the natural result of where we're at. And we talked about it a number of times on the Security Boulevard podcast. AI in and of itself is not evil. It's only as evil as the people who use it. And in this particular case, it took a little doing, although I do think jailbreaking Claude to make it do evil things was rather a chef's kiss moment, given that Claude has purported to basically try to be the I don't know, altruistic one out there. But, with a little jailbreak magic, Claude will just go do what you want it to do, including footprinting your entire network and automating some attacks. And how does it know it's not running a test or some other thing? This is only going to get worse. And that's when you consider that a lot of the other systems out there don't kind of have the guardrails in place to prevent this from happening. And if you can develop a reliable jailbreak that will let you get out of the model's guardrails, it's really only a matter of time before we start seeing this being employed against hardened targets. Yeah, let's be honest. Getting some of the easy to attack ones is probably not going to be difficult right now. I'm sure there's already folks that are mopping up some of the lesser secured governments out there. But what happens when it becomes the Pentagon or Beijing or the Kremlin or the UAE or Riyadh or some other place where it could cause real problems? Well, we can totally defend against that because we have the best cybersecurity out there. And you have an attacker that doesn't eat, doesn't sleep, doesn't care, and it will not stop until it has completely invaded your network and stolen every secret that you've got. And then it's probably going to ransom some of them for Bitcoins and crash your entire infrastructure. So who knows what might happen after that? We have to start putting guardrails in place, and we have to start anticipating the fact that the attackers have better weapons, and they're going to be coming even harder than we've seen in the past. Google is folding its robotics subsidiary Intrinsic back into its core business. That's signaling a bold push into physical AI. The move gives Intrinsic direct access to Google's AI models like Gemini and the scale of Google Cloud, while aligning more closely with Google DeepMind. CEO Sundar Pichai has reportedly described the effort as Android for robotics, which feels like a tautology. But it is aimed at creating a standardized software platform for industrial robots, similar to how Android, the operating system, unified smartphones. As competition heats up with players like Amazon and Tesla investing every penny they can into physical AI robots, Google is betting that AI-powered automation could define the next era of manufacturing. But the question that I have is, are they going to be 3 laws compliant, Al?
Absolutely not, because they're not actually going to be making that significant of a judgment. I kind of wish that was the top-level view of how things work. That's Asimov's 3 laws of robotics about not killing humans. It's kind of nice to not kill humans. Essentially, what's going on here is Intrinsic was one of the alphabet companies. They were building a platform to democratize access to robotics. And of course, AI has to be added to everything. AI has been in robotics for a long time, particularly around the idea of doing image recognition components. So what we would have previously called the sort of predictive AI or the machine learning AI rather than the generative AI. And I think we'll see more of that kind of AI continuing to be used in robotics because it suits what robotics tools do. The ability to describe how you would like the robotic to interact with whatever component you're assembling or manufacturing will be useful. I think that's the place where maybe large language model for that human described free-form description. Fundamentally, when the robot is building something, we want it to follow a determined path. We want it to absolutely be handling the components that are in its face. So hopefully more of the machine learning kind of behavior we'll see in the driving of these robots. The overall objective here for Google is that this intrinsic tool set is going to become the most common tool set for building robotic paths, allowing more organizations to use robotic manufacturing. And yeah, the AI flows over it, but I think the real thing in here is this flow state development environment for building the actual workflows that your robots are going to follow in your manufacturing processes in here. I think it's pretty cool to aim to have a standardized, simple way of doing this. Whether Google's standardized, simple way will be the winner, we'll see. There's some previous history on that. This is probably why Sundar Pichai was talking about the Android for robotics, because Android has become one of the dominant platforms on smartphones. So yeah, maybe this will work out to be one of the dominant platforms for building robotics and robotics paths. This week, Accenture agreed to acquire Ookla from Ziff Davis. The company Ookla, which owns the popular speedtest.com website as well as the wireless design company Ekahau, was sold for approximately $1.2 billion. This organization will be folded into the connectivity division of the consulting firm. Accenture announced that they will target Ookla services for end-to-end network intelligence for AI-based transformations. Let's acquire something well-known and bend it to building our networks. Tom, are you designing networks with Ookla tools?
I know a lot of people are. I haven't had to use Ekahau for quite a while. And a lot of companies are starting to ask what this means for the future, because I can remember a time way back at Wireless Field Day 2 in 2011, where Ekahau was the upstart going against companies like Fluke Networks' Air Magnet. And then eventually Ekahau upset Air Magnet and became the dominant force. And now you're seeing other companies like Hamada and Cytos and others that are creating tools to kind of take on the big giant. But here's where it gets a little bit interesting. So I did some digging into the wireless industry and started asking some very important questions about where the value would be in Accenture paying so much money for Ookla. And a curious thing happened. For the last few months, maybe a little bit longer, a lot of the designs that have been created, there's been an option to upload them back to Ekahau and make sure that you define that the things that you're uploading belong to Ekahau and they're not yours necessarily, right? Like sometimes this feels like standard boilerplate. But what would the value be in that? Well, I don't know. If a large company that does consulting work wanted to acquire a lot of data about wireless installs real fast, do you think that could be valuable? Because I think that could be really valuable. And another thing that has been kind of out there that maybe not everybody knows is an offering that Ookla was putting together that would allow organizations to use Ookla tools like Ekahau and Speedtest to verify their connectivity. So like one of the things that we've seen is a lot of people will choose their hotels, for example, based on amenities, right? Does it have a spa? Does it have a bar? Does it have good internet connectivity? And how would you be able to test that? Well, in this case, Ookla was offering a service that said, well, you can put a little plaque on the wall that says you were a 5-star Ookla hotel because we use speed test to verify that on a regular basis. And of course, every so often you want to go back and re-verify that, right? How much do you think that would be worth to a company like Hilton or Marriott or any other large hotel chain that's trying to use that as a differentiation piece? Especially if they already worked with Accenture and Accenture could just roll the cost of that into the renewal of their contract next year. Do you think that they could possibly make up the difference in the acquisition cost of a large company like that? Yeah, Yeah, I absolutely think that they could. And I think that that's the value here is that Accenture bought Ookla with all of that rich data for all of these deployments to understand how people want to deploy the things that they're building, while also looking at how they can create services revenue to regenerate those costs and kind of basically make the system pay for itself. This is the only thing that makes sense to me. The big question now, honestly, is what's going to happen to a company like Ekahau, because I don't see an immediate synergy with that. There's possibility that Ookla could just kind of continue to use Ekahau the way that they've been using it. That would make the most sense. There's also a possibility that they could spin Ekahau out and see if it could stand on its own, or possibly see if someone wants to buy it. I don't have a good answer for that because we're still early in this, but I promise you, whatever the answer is, Accenture's only going to do the thing that makes them the most potential revenue in the future. We're going to be talking about Claude again because they experienced a widespread outage. But it wasn't because of errors. It was because of a surge in user demand tied to political tensions in Washington, D.C. Following a very public clash with the White House and Department of Defense, as well as criticism from President Donald Trump, Claude briefly topped app charts ahead of OpenAI's ChatGPT, driving record signups. And that spike strained login systems and consumer tools, though enterprise APIs remained operational, probably because they weren't running on the same servers. Services were restored within hours, but the disruption highlights the infrastructure challenges AI platforms face as they scale during moments of national controversy. Al, do you think Claude could vibe code some better login servers for the consumer side of things?
Well, I think you always make a decision around how much resource you provide to the people who aren't giving you money, and how much resource you provide to people who are giving you money. And that's a little differentiation in what went on here. And the enterprise APIs, the ones that Anthropic's actually getting money for, didn't go down. They scaled very fast and very well. Yet the things that are not generating any revenue yet, the free access to Claude was the thing that failed. And as in terms of architectural design, I absolutely would design a system that didn't allow my free tier to scale infinitely when demand came up. I'd much rather have it fail than cost me vast amounts of money. Whereas if I'm earning money from the use of the resource, I'll let it scale as much as possible to get more income. So there's an element here around this is absolutely how system design works. So having a mass increase in the consumption of the Claude free edition is likely to cause an outage. It's just a matter of how much of a scale of mass effect. This is definitely one of those Streisand effect kind of elements where the president stated that, and Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, stated that they were all of the US Department of Defense, Department of War, call it what you like, is going to move off using Anthropic and Claude tools, moving to using OpenAI tools, because Anthropic declined to roll back the protections against mass domestic surveillance, which, as I understand it, is not permitted under the US Constitution by the government, as well as not turning off the protections against fully automated lethal weapons being built using Anthropic tools. So this was a sort of line that Anthropic have made and said, we're not going to allow this use case. OpenAI have said, yes, we'll allow this use case. And so the government loves OpenAI. And as a result, lots of other people like Anthropic. This kind of thing will roll back and forth. It's not overly surprising that people get very heated around which AI platform has what ethics. And it's a discussion that's not over yet. The discussion around the ethics of use of AI and what are acceptable uses is going to continue to roll onwards. And in terms of that outage, it appears to be about 4 hours of outage. Yeah, that's enough time to go back into that back end and say, there's the scaling for the free tier. Yeah, let's increase that and allow more resources to roll out, and eventually things become less overloaded. Of course, Anthropic's hoping that all of these free tier users will come in and decide that, yes, this is something worth paying for, and start giving them money. I know locally here in New Zealand, some of my local development colleagues use Claude Code extensively for modern coding techniques where they describe the outcomes and say, Claude Code, go and write my code. Same sorts of things I was talking about earlier in the Microsoft-related story of junior engineer, senior engineer. Right? The skills they're learning is to write that description. So Claude Code definitely very widely used in that more declarative, desired state kind of description of how your code should work. Where was I going with that? I think I headed out on a random tangent, and I should climb back off my soapbox and move to the next story. At Mobile World Congress 2026, Qualcomm laid out its vision for AI native wireless networks, introducing its Wi-Fi 8 portfolio and the Fast Connect 8800 platform with multi-gigabit speeds and improved performance in dense environments. The company also debuted its X105. It's a 5G modem RF system, and it's designed to support 5G advanced and early 6G development, with built-in AI for smarter connectivity and efficiency. With a new global 6G coalition and expanded infrastructure under its Dragonwing brand, Qualcomm is positioning wireless networks not just for faster speeds, but as an intelligent AI-powered computing platform for the next decade. More AI for the future, Tom.
Possibly, but here be dragons. And I'm not just talking about the branding that Qualcomm seems to use on all of their chips. So point one, and this is something that I brought up back at CES, I wrote in a blog on my own personal site. Wi-Fi 8 is not a thing. Sorry, guys. It's pre-standard. It's not decided. It's pre-standard Wi-Fi 8, which means a lot of the features that are in there right now probably are more or less baked, but not final. So I'd be a little weary about doing anything wide with this deployment. It seems like Qualcomm's kind of aiming this at development stuff because it includes Wi-Fi 8 and 6G, which are not the same thing for those people out there that are curious. It's faster. It's trying to make better decisions and do better things. And why would you want to do that? Well, it turns out that we're hungry for data right now. We need all the datas everywhere, fistful of datas even, which was also a really excellent Star Trek Next Generation episode. But just like that, you can never be sure if the data you're getting is good or bad until you get it back into the system and process it. And you need to get it from where it's at to where it wants to go. And as we know, data has gravity. And how do you overcome all that data gravity? Well, you send it as fast as possible. And that's kind of what I'm looking at here is they're using AI, in this case, a little bit of buzzwordy, to engineer better wireless networks. Because one of the things that we're running into is no amount of spectrum is going to reduce the noise. No amount of multi-antenna operation is going to make things go faster without some kind of overarching software to kind of guide these things. And so a lot of these tweaks are kind of designed almost like OS 10 Snow Leopard, which was designed to just make everything run a little bit better. That's what we're looking at here. 7 was a big leap forward, Wi-Fi 7 that is, and Wi-Fi 8 is kind of doing some cleanup work behind the scenes. But by positioning this as, an intelligent AI-powered computing platform, what you're really saying is we're going to turn all of those edge devices, whether they're phones or tablets or laptops or, I don't know, headsets or whatever, into data collectors for AI algorithms to crunch on. And the faster we can get that data uploaded to wherever it lives in LLM land, the better off we're all going to be. Cautious optimism. I'm glad to see that companies that are not just the usual suspects, I'm looking at you, Realtek, are the ones that are out there trying to push the envelope of Wi-Fi 8. I will note that this week we finally got Apple devices that were all across the board Wi-Fi 7. I'm pretty sure that unless you went to the big box store recently, you're probably not even running a Windows or a Wi-Fi 7 AP at home. Maybe we don't need to constantly be trying to buy the best and brightest. I can still remember deploying an 802.11n. That's Wi-Fi 4 for you people. Belkin, that was so pre-standard that I ended up having to throw it out 8 months later when the boss suddenly wanted something different. So take it with a grain of salt, whether it's pre-standard Wi-Fi 8, pre-standard 6G, pre-standard AI. We got to have a little bit of standard around here, folks. But one thing that you can count on that is so standard and so fun is all of the events that we do during Tech Field Day. And next week, we've got a big one coming up, Al.
Yes, indeed. It is Cloud Field Day number 25. It's the quarter century of Cloud Field Day, although I guess not quarter century in years. We're not quite that old with cloud. I'll be out in Santa Clara with my wonderful panel of delegates and presenting companies, including Hammerspace and VMware, and Futurum Research will also be representing there. My delegates will also be getting some other experiences along the way. It's going to be an interesting and fun event for us. Do follow along the hashtag CFD25 on all your favorite social media, and watch out for what's happening, particularly on the Tech Field Day LinkedIn profile. Keep a watch for us there. Personally, I'm staying in the Silicon Valley area and going to the NVIDIA GTC conference the following week, where I'm expecting to see a lot of our Tech Field Day sponsoring companies. I was surprised just how many will be there. Of course, Tom, you're back in the left-hand coast again in March as well.
I am. I've got my black hoodie and my black hat and my sunglasses all ready to go for the RSAC conference, because we're going to be having Tech Field Day Extra there. We've got great presentations coming up from Veeam, Object First, and Commvault. Schedule's up on the website if you want to tune in live, including on YouTube. Did you know that we're streaming on YouTube now for all of our Tech Field Day events? If you're not already subscribed to the Tech Field Day YouTube channel, you absolutely should, so you can get notified when we go live with great Field Day content. And we're going to be talking to a lot of great companies while we're out there, but we can't talk about what's going on because it's sensitive, compartmentalized information, as we learn if you take any kind of security test, which I'm sure there's going to be some security tests there on site as well. And then after I am done wiping all of my devices and tearing down the VPNs, I'm going to be back out in Santa Clara for more great Field Day action at Networking Field Day number 40. We are officially over the hill. There's going to be black streamers everywhere, and we're going to be talking about having to take extra ibuprofen, something like that. Yeah, it's over 15 years since the very first Networking Field Day, and we're very excited to be coming at you with a big lineup of presenters, some old favorites, some new faces, both on the presenting side, but also for the people who are around the table. You can go over to techfieldday.com and learn more about who they are right now. And we would love it if you would, because we want to show them some love. But we love that you are watching the Tech Field Day Rundown every week, every Wednesday, new episodes. Find us on YouTube. Subscribe to us in your favorite podcast application. Don't forget that we're also streamed on Techstrong TV as well. And then we are all over the place with all the things that we do: the Tech Field Day podcast, the Security Boulevard podcast, Field Day events, coverage from a whole bunch of other stuff. Wherever we are, you can catch us across Tech Field Day, Techstrong, and Futurum Group programs. We're going to be back next Wednesday to talk about all the IT news in the week that was, probably some more stuff about Mobile World Congress and a few other things that broke along the way. But until then, for myself, Tom Hollingsworth, for Alistair Cook, and everyone else here at Tech Field Day, thank you so much. We're wishing you and yours a great day.